The following program deals with a controversial
subject.
The theories expressed are not the only possible interpretation.
The viewer is invited to make a judgment based on all available information.
the top talents in the comic book business are here to tell everything they know.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Industry of Comics episode number 9, show number 10. 10, we've hit the 10 show mark, which is very nice. Brought to you by these two guys below us, Jesse James from Jesse James Comics and Dennis Barger from Wonder World Comics, both longtime industry LCS owners in the trenches, know what's going on, and we bring you great guests like the man we have next to us, Mr. Marat Mychaels. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
I'm glad we
fabulous.
Yeah, I'm glad we could get you on with Jesse this time, because Jesse he was smart enough to not go get out lost in La Mancha in Texas fighting oil wells.
Yeah. And there should be a law against Route 190 East in Texas, which is 4 hours without anything but hanging with cows and sheep for 4 hours. So it's a good thing I was actually talking to Bryan. He had called me, and I said to Bryan, I said, "Oh, I made the wrong turn where I'm talking. Oh, it's not a big deal. I'll be back on the freeway in no time." And then 4.5 hours, I'm like, where the hell am I?
Okay, I just have to ask one question. Did you go through Albuquerque and actually make the wrong turn at Albuquerque?
No, it wasn't Albuquerque. I was actually deep in Texas.
Deep in the heart of
Bryan
Texas?
Just called me, just missed the turn. And it's a good thing I had got gas, or else I would be still in Texas in someone's sheep field in the back. So it was fun. But hey, listen, I'm back home talking to my good friend Marat. I've known Marat for 15 years. I've done over 20 exclusives with them. So very good guy in the industry, and I more our generation, right? So that's always a good thing there.
Yep. No, I think we share the same love for comics, kind of built on the same stuff.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we have a question that we ask all of our guests.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
What is a comic book store?
Besides the
other than a place that sells comics.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it was the place I spent most of my childhood. I've told this before. My family was very poor, and when I fell in love with comics, I could only afford about one book a week if I was lucky. So I would just always hang out at the comic book store until one day. It was the Golden Apple in L.A., Hollywood, very famous comic store, obviously. And I hung out there until one day the assistant manager was like, "Kid, you're in here all the time. Do you just want a job? We can't pay you because you're 12, but, we'll give you store credit." And so it was my home away from home. Like, once I fell in love with comics, I engulfed them. And again, it sucked because, I think comics were like 60 cents back then, and my allowance was $1 a week. So it was like, if I'm lucky I get one comic, but I absorbed everything. So for me, it was definitely home away from home, and then eventually I made a lot of my close friends through that store because they would come in as customers. I got to the point where I would help out and work the register. And
well, that's still who's who of comic history. Like, tell us some of the people you got to meet before you knew who they were, and
Well, I mean, before I was a fan of his work, Howard Chaykin used to come in there all the time. I met Nicholas Cage would come pick up his comics. This was like Valley Girl days before he became a superstar.
Wow.
Dave Stevens would come in all the time. Roy and his at the time wife Dan Thomas, I believe it was Dan. William Stout would come in. So, and I was like the chubby little kid who was just, I was shy, but, the minute they spoke to me, I had a million questions because I was, pretty much like once I started getting into comics, I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing with my life. Like, there was no plan B, there was nothing. Mike Thibodeau used to come in And I was, I was to John Byrne and George Perez. Those were my guys. And he'd be like, "Oh, then you must love Jack Kirby." And I was like, "Oh no, I hate Jack Kirby." Because I saw Superpowers, which was, Jack in his later days. And to my, 12-year-old mind, I was like, there's square knees and the figures are a little stiff and the faces aren't that pretty. I was like, I don't see any Jack Kirby in this stuff. And Mike Thibodeau and a guy who does the manager, Scott, they would just like lay the books out in front of me and they'd be like, "You see the power in this John Byrne pose? That's Jack Kirby. You see this punch that George Perez drew that you love? That's Jack Kirby." And so eventually...
Didn't Jack live like 15, 20 miles from Golden Apple at one point?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I just... by the time I was blessed, I got to go to Jack's house at one point.
Yeah.
He lived in, I believe it was Tarzana, which was, probably a 90-minute drive from Hollywood. But yeah, so, I got to meet, Frank Miller used to come into the store, they did big time store signings. So for a kid, that was nirvana. Like, holy crap. Like the 12-year-old gets to, have conversations with Frank Miller about storytelling, and stuff like that.
What year was this?
So I think I got into comics into 1982.
1982.
I believe that was it was X-Men 173, which blew my mind. And then I worked there probably till about 85.
Okay.
So 3 window, but I was there like even if they were like, "All right, your shift is done," I was like, "Oh, you're not getting rid of me yet."
Yeah,
like, here until you guys close these doors. Like, that's it.
Yeah,
yes,
that's
sir.
it. I
think the great thing about working in a comic book store in 1982 was, first of all, new issues came in on Friday, so it was a little bit different atmosphere. We didn't know what was in the boxes. I remember opening up the boxes, and the crowd of subscribers would come in at 6 o'clock, and I'd open up the box and say, "Okay, who wants Wolverine #1?" And people would raise their hand. That was a box holder back then. And then and same thing, I started off at 12 in 1982 as well, which is kind of funny, right? Most people start off at 12, 13, or 14. That's like the key thing there. And you're not realizing back then you're presenting history nonstop. Now, 42 years later, you're like, "Oh yeah, whatever, Wolverine #1." But then you're like this young kid who, when Frank Miller came in, I watched the line for Jack Kirby in 1982, made sure no one cut. Didn't really understand the significance till 20 years later, right? So it's good that you had that kind of that young, fresh start. So basically, you're paid in comic book bag and boards, correct?
Well, no, I did bags and boards, hundreds, and I was paid in store.
Okay,
and so that's how I could afford buying comics. And then if I bought something that increased in value, but I wasn't in love with, I would trade that into the store for more store credit, so I can get 2 books or 3 books or whatever. So that's what fed the beast.
Actually, this is a perfect example to hit one of these topics that I always want to talk about but never get to. So I came in a little bit later, closer to like 84, 85, and by then this whole I'll call it the speculator market was kind of just hitting a boom. But you were in this weird period, 82, where the silver and bronze was starting to hit, kind of collectible values. But you're talking about holding Wolverine #1, Frank Miller. And, I remember there was a book on all the walls of every shop I ever went to in like the early 90s, late 80s. And that was like the Pope John Paul comic book.
Yeah.
It was like a $5 to $10 wall book. But like these things were 50-cent books in 1982. People weren't buying 10 of them, were they?
Yeah, actually, John Paul was a $1 book, and there was a big uprise about it being $1 because I think at that time comics were like 75 cents, maybe
60.
60 cents. And awesome, this $1 book came out, so you could no longer get 2 books for $1. So there was already this outrage to it. But I think it was also, and Marat knows this, I don't think we ever used the word Silver Age, Golden Age back in the early 80s, because that wasn't necessarily needed to be said.
Yeah.
Well,
Definitely
take us through like some of the early speculation moments that you remember, like books that people would buy 2 or 3 of,
or
even
lines
was, like,
out the
unheard
door
of back then.
Yeah.
Is it me or Jesse?
I know you can go ahead, Mark.
You both started at age 12 in like 1982, so I think this is kind of a good perspective to get.
I think you're right. I mean, it was kind of 84 where it really started. I remember Dark Knight #1. People were trying. We had a limit how many people can order or can buy at the register. Thor 337 when
there you go.
That was one that also like people were speculating huge on. I remember back issues, all of a sudden people started buying up, Elektra, everything Elektra.
Yep.
Those are the ones I remember.
I think the biggest book that everybody wanted in 82, 83, 84 was Daredevil 158. That was considered the book to own. That was like if it came in, people would go crazy. Oh my gosh, Daredevil 158. So I think there was this great, obviously, Marat being a George Perez fan, he knows the fandom around New Teen Titans during that time, which is kind of funny because you were fans of the 2 hottest books, right?
Were you drawing at this time, Marat, when you were working at the shop?
Yeah, it was always like, I love drawing. It's funny, I used to come into Golden Apple to buy like trading cards. I was into like the kid trading cards, not the sports cards, but like all the movies. And I would never even like look at the comics for years. And then it wasn't even a comic book store. I went to a newsstand looking for a different comic book based on a toy. And that X-Men just left the stands. I went home. I think I didn't go to sleep till like 2 a.m. just rereading it. The next day I was at the comic book store and first I fell in love with Paul Smith and I was like, all right, I got to get every Paul Smith X-Men. And when some of these books were already like 2-3 books, and for me at the time, I was like, holy crap, like it's going to take me a year to get these 6 issues. And then after that, once I got there, it was the John Byrne X-Men and I kept trying to go backwards. And again, I could only get like one every 2 weeks. So that was a journey. And right after that is, I always needed, I don't know how you guys are with your collecting. When I was young, I needed a jumping point. And I go, okay, well, I can't afford 1 through whatever. So it's like, FF, I'll start collecting when She-Hulk joins. That's my FF. Teen Titans, Robin becomes Nightwing. That's my jumping on point. I collect Teen Titans, Nightwing on. So
one of the great things about comics back then was when you would read one of your favorite stories, and then all of a sudden, I was reading Avengers, mid 80s, and all of a sudden, like Hawkeye would show up with Mockingbird, and then it'd be like, oh, hey, you guys are starting a West Coast team. Editor's note: see West Coast Avengers #1. That's a point where I'm going to jump on, and that made me religious with West Coast Avengers. They don't do that anymore.
Right. And reference points are no longer done because what Marvel and DC realized where they were sending you backwards, where they needed to send you forwards to buy new issues and not buy back issues because they weren't making any money off back issues. It's that old term where someone says, oh, AF-15 just sold for 1.5 million. Marvel just made a whole bunch of money. No, Marvel made their 2 cents on that book. They stopped making money on that book going forward. So,
well, it's funny because you get that as an artist. Like somebody will walk up and they're like, if you have a bad interaction, which I try not to ever have, but if you can't do something that somebody wants you to do or they're unhappy about something, they go, I've been supporting you, all your time. I buy all your Image books and I buy all your Marvel stuff, and you're like, dude, like I don't get that money. Like, I got paid for. you bought one, like, I appreciate you supporting me. You know, I just, you know, this, we've had these conversations. My thing is no fans, no career. Like, that's where it all starts. You know, I don't care how good you are. If the fans aren't supporting you or, you know, work, then you're just good sitting doodling. So I love my fans, but yeah, like you said, you know, back issues don't make the company or the creator money.
Yep. But they help build the mythos. And one of the things that kind of is in here, and I put it in the private chat, Brian, if you can click on that and drop it up on stage. And so I came in 84. I was also a huge card collector. And this was one of my go-tos when I went to the comic shop, because it was about the only place you could find these. This is the old 1984, I think it's Comic Images. And they did the first appearances and this card set, and it had all of the books that I saw on all the walls of comic book stores. And yeah, and I mean, it was just like, wow, I might not even find Iron Man #1 in a store on a back issue wall, but I can have the cover in my little 9-page pocket. And this also led me to like Marvel Tales, where it would be like, you know, I'd see a Spider-Man cover here, and then when I saw Marvel Tales reprint that issue, that was a go-to to be able to pick up and read a story that I was so out of my price range.
Yeah, these are cool.
I think where the companies miss the point to what you mean, Jesse, is comic collectors are completists.
Yep.
So having those back issues, if I have 1 through 30, you know, I'm buying 30 through 60 or 31 through 60. So me having back issues actually is going to make sure I keep buying this book, even if it goes through a dry period creatively, because I'm like, you know, Daredevil was a perfect example. I had all the Frank Miller stuff. When Frank left and the book kind of went, you know, down a notch, it was still some good stuff, but it wasn't anywhere near the level of what Frank was doing.
No.
I kept because I was already committed to collecting that book. And, you know, and then when Frank came back with Dave Mazzucchelli and we got Born Again, I was like, oh, I never stopped buying Daredevil. I just kept going until the next great creative story, you know, line came about. So I think that's what the big companies do miss the point of, you know, your back issues do help you sell new books.
Yeah.
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 One of the things that we didn't get a chance to really talk about because he didn't announce it, but Rob Liefeld released this the other day, talking about a book that he drew, inked, you know, wrote the story when he was, you know, in grade school, and how he, you know, printed out a bunch of them and gave it to all his friends. Did you ever do something like this? Did you ever create your own comic book at this time when you were working in the comic book store as a 12-year-old or, you know, teenager?
I mean, I created my own characters and I would draw 2 or 3 pages. I never did a whole book, just because I just couldn't, like, my mind was like, oh, I need to do this and I need to do this. And I had a notebook full of these Marvel stories that I was going to tell someday. And yeah, it's because then I'll see like somebody do a similar story of what I thought. And I was like, oh yeah, we were all reading the same stuff. We were all inspired by the same thing. We all, you know, saw that issue and that cliffhanger that never got picked up. We all had our ideas of what we would do with it. So, I mean, so me and Rob have been friends forever. I met Rob when I was 12 years old. And he was 16. So, you know, I've, you know, known him forever, spent, you know, tons of time with him, been in his storage unit, which is insane. Best way. I've never seen that until he posted it, which is hilarious because I have sketches from Rob back in '84 and stuff.
And it's so Fred Hembeck, too. It's so Fred Hembeck. Right? I love it. Yeah.
No, it's really cool.
So
and Fred is one of the coolest guys. So.
Dude, and I'll tell you what, let me sidebar into a Fred Hembeck. Every year on my birthday, he gives me this long, drawn-out, like, greeting about me and my birthday, and he does it for everybody, and I'm just like, how do you have the time, Fred?
Yeah, no, it's awesome, right?
Yeah, dude, and I'm just like, and 12-year-old me is like, holy shit, Fred Himbeck, the guy who did all of the calendars on the back of Marvel Age that I literally read every month, is sending me a happy birthday note.
No, it's the same way. I remember like George Perez would wish me happy birthday, and George was my favorite guy when I was young. And so I had met George. I got to become friends with George.
You got George's haircut even.
I got George's haircut. But still, even after meeting numerous times, and George inked a couple of covers over me early on in my career. Every time he would send me like a happy birthday post on Facebook, I was like, holy crap, George Perez. Like, I went from whatever I was, 42 to 12 in an instant.
Yeah.
Sure. There's some about that, the guys you grow up with and who you looked up to that, acknowledge you outside of just like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. Thanks for the kind words. When they reach out to you, like, it means a lot, and it's super cool.
Did you go to the El Cortez before switched over to the convention center, San Diego? Or were you San Diego Con all the way?
No. First, I went to when it was the smaller San Diego Convention Center. New one there is. So one year it was back when, your parents I had to take the bus. Like my mom was like, you want to go to this convention? You on that ground and go. I think I was 14, 15. And that's back when people could call in and actually get a hotel room for somebody else. With a credit card. And me and my buddy, we jumped on that bus and we went down there, and that was my first San Diego before it switched over, which I believe was 87, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
I got the first one there, and they went to the big convention center, and it's still overwhelming when you walk up there.
There's very few people that I've run into that have. I mean, people say that they've grown up in comics, but man, you've grown up in comics and been around comics basically, a large part of your life. And then to also become a creator, a lot of people's dreams that always, worked at a comic book store became into comics. But one of the things that I see you talk about a lot and that you bring up a lot is how you kind of talk about the image, early Image days. And you always say that you were the first Image Comics rookie. Can you explain that a little bit and what that means?
So again, like I said, I met Rob when I was 12, and we became buddies. We got closer as the years went. He used to intimidate the crap out of me. I was a really shy, docile kid, and Rob kind of had this. He's the same guy he's always been.
Yeah.
It's that same kind of energy, and it used to kind of intimidate me a little bit. But when I graduated high school, he hired me on to be his assistant. And so as Image Comics started happening, he's always been one of the biggest supporters of my work. Was always great to me. Always, he wasn't one of those like, I'm gonna try to keep you to myself as long as I can. You can be my assistant. He wanted me to do bigger and better things. And when Image started happening, he just one day like, hey, draw this book. And I was like, hell yeah. And he was like, we had a deal in place, and it was just like, you're going to take a shot on yourself, like we're all taking a shot on ourselves. But I was like, you freaking kidding me? I'm going to be, basically, it was super intimidating. Because when you think like my crappy work at the time, and I was, 19-year-old kid, so I look at that stuff and I cringe all the time. I thought I was doing something, but I also knew I was like, there's Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri, who's to this day one of my absolute favorites. He's on my personal Mount Rushmore, and Eric Larson and Jim Valentino, who's also a mentor. It was crazy, but and I was like, people are gonna hate my book. They're gonna love everybody else's, and they're gonna hate mine. But the fan reaction was spectacular. I mean, I remember me and Norm Rapman, who was the inker on the book, we're pulling up to our first door sign. The book is about to premiere, and there's like 200 people in line around the block. And me and Norm are like, who else is signing here? Like,
what book is this? So first of all, for the audience, tell them what book this is.
Oh, it was called Brigade. which
was
a
Brigade
young-
was Brigade your very first published work in comics as well, or was it just?
It was technically it was second, but it was the first credited. My first published work was I penciled half of X-Force #5 over Rob's layouts, and I was supposed to get credit. And me and Rob talked to the editor all the time, and the editor's like, "We got you." And I'm 19 years old. I'm telling all my friends, "You guys, this Friday my first book comes out. It's a Marvel book." Everybody's like, "Yeah, you're full of it." And I'm like, "Oh no, you'll see." And then that Friday comes around, and I open up that book, and
no.
And I didn't feel as horrible because Brian Murray did the other half of the book, penciling over his layouts. So I'm like, well, Brian had been, at this point, he had been at Marvel and DC. He was a well-known artist. I was like, well, they screwed him too. So I wasn't screwed by myself. But
so X-Force #5, and then Image happens.
Yeah. So Marat, one of the things we do on this channel is whenever I get creators, artists, or writers on, I always like to ask what are their first works. I have a living list that I put in a link to everything about creators' first works. And so we have your X-Force #5 uncredited and Brigade. So we got two more that we're going to hit throughout the show. So before we'll get into the You Pooh stuff later, but what was your first cover also?
It was Brigade Volume 2, #1.
Brigade Volume 2.
So, #1. We did a 4-issue miniseries, and then when we came back with the regular series, that was my first cover, and it was a triple gatefold, so tripped it.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
I'm going to bring it up real quick.
Everybody got their own little spread, and then as you folded it out, it was the other characters.
Yeah, it was very George Perez inspired. That's it. Yep.
Wow.
That was it. Look at those arms. Those are some 90s biceps right there, buddy.
That's
well,
awesome.
I think that the cool, amazing thing is this undying friendship within that group. I've known you and Norm forever, and everybody else pretty much. And there seems to be this, if you're walking in a con, it's not Rob walking with security, it's Rob walking with you or Norm or wherever. You're just this cool kid group that continues to hang together.
Well, I mean, the thing is, for the most part, I mean, you have run-ins when you know people so long and stuff, but for the most part, we all really liked each other and we like being around each other. And I think now, the older we get, the more we realize how special that time was and that we got to share it. And you can't really, you can only tell war stories with the guy that worked with you. So it's like I
Band
can
of
tell
Brothers.
You that it very much is. And, and we have some crazy stories. And yeah, I was at WonderCon 2 weeks ago, and Rob texted me, he's like, I'm coming to the show, and just left my table for 3 hours. And we walked around and we looked at old comics, and we looked at original art that he can afford and I can't. And
I'll tell you just a funny anecdote about that. So I posted when you were supposed to be on last week, and we had to move everything. The first person on my Facebook page to this week Marat Mychaels is going to be on our show was Rob.
Yep.
Nope. Yeah. No, we're genuinely really good buddies, and we support each other. We cheer for each other's success. The one thing is, the guys that have remained close, there was never a lot of, there was no jealousy. There was no, we wanted to achieve everything we possibly could, but it wasn't like, well, I got to do this over, push this guy out of the way to do it. It was just more like me and Dan Fraga, we were always like, Dan would do a new page. I'd be like, oh man, this Dan's leveling up. I got to go level up, Or Dan would get a colorist that, made him look even better. And I'd be like, now I got to go find the colors that will make me look even better.
Sure.
And we were like little kids, Hey Rob, can I talk to you?
One of the things,
it's
one of the things that you talk
stories.
about during those days, Marat, is that this is a quote that I saw from you that was really interesting, because it feels like it's totally different nowadays. And there was like this bullpen moment in like these studios, right? And you say you come from the days where all we did was draw comic books. That's all you guys did. You just drew all the time, and there was no room for egos because of it. You guys were just constantly drawing comic books.
Well, and part of it was, as competitive as we were, the beauty was really compensate us pretty well. I know some guys have complained, he made so much off those books, but I was like, we were paid tremendously well. I mean, I remember doing a bus tour with Don Perlin, who had, he was at Valiant at the time, but obviously went back in the 70s and maybe even the 60s, and had been a veteran. And Don was asked me what my page rate was, and I was like, "Oh, it's this." And like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? They're paying kids like you. I don't even make that now. And I was like,
Right.
"Oh shit!" Like I knew we were getting paid well, but so that was one of the things. Like, money never kind of became a thing between us. We were all compensated really well. So I think that credit needs to go to Rob, because now I'll talk to certain guys from, Wildstorm or Top Cow, and they'll tell me what they were getting paid, and I'll be like, oh, okay, like you guys were making in a week what I was making for half a page. Got it. I can see why you guys had such different experiences than we did, so I got to give Rob all that credit, because he created an environment when it was fun. I mean, Even with like Brigade, it was like, here's kind of a guideline. You and Eric go do what you want to do. And, me and Eric, with Eric Stevenson, who, runs Image Comics now, he was the writer on the book. But we go co-plot. He was literally letting us be creative. If I stirred a little out, he kind of put his back into, place on the road. But he was allowing us to be creative, and he understood.
Well, that was the Marvel way. That was the way he got brought up through.
Yeah.
That was, I've heard all these stories where Stan would just come out and have what we call it now a bar napkin pitch, and if he trusted the team could just do whatever it was as long as that bar napkin pitch was met.
Oh no, I've sat down with Rob and I'm like, hey, like I got to get going on the next issue. Like, what do you want to do? And he'd be like, all right, Battlestone and Seahawk will have an argument, and then we got to establish that Bloodstrike is coming for him, and then give me a cool fight scene for like 6 pages, and then we'll cut to this, and then we'll end with this, and literally it would be 45 seconds. Then I go straight to Eric's office and I go, okay, this is what Rob wants in the book. Now let's make it awesome. Like, how can we, so he was letting us, it's the problem with the industry now is you can't be but so creative.
Well, there's a lot of micromanagers now.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've hit that moment. We've hit that moment. Let's get into
we're
it.
definitely, because the next question I have is definitely unfiltered.
Yo, let's do this.
Valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
All right, we have hit unfiltered time. If you're scared, go to church, ladies and gentlemen. Dennis, let's have it.
So you were there during probably one of the darkest points of the early Image when Rob was kind of getting pushed out and getting ostracized for going with Jim back to work at Marvel, right?
Yeah, well, at that point, I wasn't in the studio as much. I had just decided to move to Phoenix, and so I would come to the studio, but I wasn't as involved as I had been previously. But I heard all the conversations and I knew all.
Yeah, so give
everything
us a little that you can give us. Like, what was it like just being, you were literally Rob's boy, you know, and then all of a sudden Rob's under the microscope from the other image founders, and there's intense pressure on him.
You know, those guys were so competitive from the get-go, even before Image happened. I mean, those guys, you know, were just like, what did Todd do this month? All right, I gotta outdo him. Like, he did a splash page, I gotta do a double splash page. Oh shit, Jim did, you know, a double splash page. I gotta do 2 double splash pages. You know, they were always uber competitive with each other, even back in the Marvel days. So, you know, throughout their Image years, comics offices were on the same floor in the same building as the Extreme Studios offices. And you know, I was friends with a lot of the people that worked at the Image Comics office. So I would go in there to hang out a lot. Once in a while, they'd have owners meetings in there, and I would be the fly on the wall, you know, pretending I'm talking to this person, but listening here. So it wasn't surprising. I knew, you know, things were already getting contentious between some of them, primarily Rob and Todd. I've said this before. I think Todd loved Rob as the little brother. I don't think Todd could ever allow him to see, and this is just my opinion, but, you know, he could never allow himself to see Rob as an equal, even though they were partners. And, you know, he just couldn't take that Rob could stand up for himself. And, you know, I mean, you guys have had Rob on the show, you know, but
Marat, one of the things that I talked about the other day was the fact that Rob Liefeld is in GOAT status when it comes to comic books. He is, you know, greatest of all time status, where people are putting him up there. You can hate his art, you know, art's subjective, but you can't deny the books that he's sold, the things that he has been part of that have changed the comic book industry for the better, and monetarily, everything. Like, he is
and
GOAT
even
status.
His reaching out into pop culture with the Levi's and Spike Lee stuff, and going on these talk shows when a lot of people just didn't have that kind of demeanor to do that.
He was the California
to me,
kid,
Rob is one of my Mount Rushmore creators.
Look, you can dislike his work, but you can't, like, anybody who talks smack about his work, all those same creators would die to have his career, or to have his reach, or to have his voice, or to have his fan base who's rabid. And, you know, all these guys, you know, which to me is just jealousy. It's like, okay, you know, you don't think he's a good artist, that's fine. But, you know, you look at singers, you know, how many people are more talented than, let's say, Britney Spears was?
Yeah.
But they're playing a freaking piano at a lounge somewhere, and maybe they can sing Circle. It's about her, but it's not about how well you sing or how well you draw or how well you act. What it is how do you connect with people? Is what you're doing getting a reaction out of people? Because if you're not, it doesn't matter. You can be the, you know, technically the best, you know, comic artist ever, and if you're not connecting with people, I see it all the time. But these guys are just tremendous. They do beautiful, you know, scenery with amazing cars and great buildings, and, you know, every fold of clothing is perfect. But none of it really gets emotion.
Oh,
the
perfect example of that is Dave Stevens. If you watch that documentary on Netflix, he was one of the most brilliant artists. However, he couldn't get a deadline to save any of the companies he worked for, you know, career, you know, lives, or himself, you know. And if he's the greatest, but he only has 30 covers to his entire career, what does that mean, you know?
And again, like, not he's on a level. There's levels to this. Part of it is talent. You have what God gives you, but part of it is, if you take, hey, if all the night, 3 weeks or a month to draw a cover, it's going to be the best cover I've ever done.
Yeah.
But that's, one of the, best things I've ever heard is we're in the business of periodicals, not art.
Yep.
Like, we need to be there consistently. People want your work. Once they invest in you, they know you're going to be there tomorrow.
Right.
And the day after, or else you are, Dave Stevens, where, we all hold those 30 books, and Rocketeer graphic novel and, in this phase, but that's all we ever got.
Yeah, but I think the thing that I know there's this rub off from you hanging with Rob, because you're, I've known you for so long. You're very tough skinned, and we've talked about this over the last 15 years on what we probably should gravitate to, which is Do You Pooh? And we would sit there and talk, and your answer traditionally would be, okay, that's cool, but I really don't care what they say because I got this I'm doing next. You're always about what's next. And tell us about that process.
All right, well, I'm going to use, because that's too good of a lead-in not to use Jesse. So what's next is, it kind of ties everything together. Me and Rob are, we worked out a license extreme books and characters, and we're actually going to do Avengelyne Omnibus.
Ooh.
Wow.
So we're announcing that here. Russ, if you're still in the chat, can you put the link up? Russ Cassidy works with me.
Sure.
He builds all the Kickstarters for us. I'm super excited about that. Like, it's going to be a 370-page omnibus. Rob is banging out new papers. This is a deal we've been working on for probably 2 years until we finally got everything to where we want it to be. It's, again, I learned by being around Rob, and not to make this a Rob conversation, but it is like all your haters can hate, but success is your guide.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
there's two things that happened. One was when I was doing Brigade, I got at that point there was no email. We'd get fan mail, and you'd get bags of it, and a lot of it was, very, complimentary. And I get this letter, I open it up, and the guy goes, "You're absolutely the worst. I spit on your work." And it was a little plastic bag with spit in it. and I just laughed my ass off, and I went into Rob's office like I beat you. Like, you can't get hate mail worse than this. This guy sent me his. So that, and I struggled for a while after the Image kind of collapsed, and I was getting work where I can find it. I was like any other comic book artist, where I was, just trying to get people to like my work, and then I, and trying to churn fans, because a lot of people are like, oh, he's a Liefeld ripoff, he's an Image guy, that's what he does. And I was like, you're not even looking at my work. Like, my work has changed so much since then. I was a 19-year-old kid, and that's what you're judging me on. Now I'm in my 30s, I have all this experience, I've gotten better as an artist. But people were like, you are who we say you are.
Right.
And I've read, of all things, and it's not a political thing at all, a quote from Karl Rove, who ran Bush Jr.'s campaign. And it was about the second term. And he said, they stopped worrying about churning people who don't like Bush into voters, and they catered to their base.
Yep.
And I was like, you know what? Why do I care about the person that wants to talk smack and doesn't like my work? Odds are, out of 100, I'm not even going to turn one of them into a fan. But what I'm going to do is these 100 people that like my work, I'm just going to give them more of what they want. And that kind of is where the whole Do You Pooh thing grew.
It was Was Counterpoint your kickoff to that new direction, or had you already moved in that direction?
I mean, I kind of saw that the industry was changing, and I realized you don't have to work at Marvel or DC to have a financially successful career in comics. Conventions were changing. People were starting to, artists were starting to show up at conventions, to make money. Because before, artists would come and they do some commissions, but it really wasn't part of their. It was extra. It was the pocket money. It was the I need extra money. Sure. But I was like, this is changing. Like, you can literally start doing shows, make as much money as I was working at DC at the time, and I was like, well, my window is and this is if I'm 100% booked all the time, and I have a monthly book or I have an assignment every month. My window was about $60,000, which. Living in California, you have just enough to pay bills and put some food in your stomach. And I was like, well, I can probably make that on the con circuit, if I do cons a year. And so I started doing that. I did a book called Naughty and Nice.
Yep.
And that was kind of successful. And then the Do You Pooh thing was just a joke between me and Terry Sala, who co-wrote it with me. The next morning, I called them and I said, let's just do this for fun. Like, let's just do it. And I literally thought it's got about a 2-month shelf life, maybe 3 conventions, 3 or 4 variants. And then people will move on to the next thing. Because it's goofy, it's funny. People will go, that's cute. I'll buy that. And then they'll move on, And, I've had the same price points, the same kind of super limited print runs. And people were like, this is dumb. Nobody's going to buy this book. You're trying to charge $25 for a book nobody knows about. And I was like, dude, it is what it is. You don't have to like it. I think, Jack, sorry, just saw Mr. Bolo.
Oh, yeah.
People talk smack, but I was like, I don't care. Like, don't buy it. But every convention, I would sell out of my 25 copies. And the more we did, the more people were like, oh, when are you going to do this cover? Or when are you going to do this cover? And then I was like, oh, people really are, gravitating towards this. And I thought it was a goofy idea. But I started understanding it hits on your childhood nostalgia. You're giving them Winnie the Pooh, which people love. And then on top of that, you're giving them these classic covers that speak to them.
Yep.
The way that X-173 speaks to me.
But I do want to bring up something because it's kind of been an ongoing theme with this show. And you kind of hit a across the line level with Do You Pooh. Naughty and Nice, I think sometimes goes a little over that line. And then the other one, Hardly Thin. Yeah. So we like to talk about IP theft, IP borrowing, parody covers. There is a very fine line. And for somebody who came from Image with creators first, IP first, and protecting those IPs, where do you justify the kind of, and I'll say it, I love you, I love you, so don't take offense to this. But I think you definitely crossed the line with some of the IP use that you definitely are borrowing from.
Well, I'll say this. They're parody books. So the Pooh thing, I think, is just, it's Mad Magazine. They freaking, they had Superman all the time. He just didn't have the S. They had Batman all the time. He just, even like Marvel's What The, they would constantly have DC characters and they were just parodies. And I had an attorney, who told me, like, this is parody law. Like, this is 15% difference. You're in parody. If you can't use logos and you can't use, symbols that are copyrighted. And so I've always stuck to that. I pushed the envelope for sure. I mean, until Pooh became public domain, I went to my mailbox every day going, is this the day of cease and desist? Nope. I live to fight another day.
Yep.
Again,
The empire did not come for me today.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Well, and
You know, and then-
that's where, and there's a lot of young creators that I see.
Well,
here's what I see: they see you and they see Pooh, and they go, "Oh, I don't have to talk to a lawyer. I'll do exactly what he's doing." But then they do the one extra step of putting the X-Men logo on the topless Jean Grey's belt.
I see it all the time. Like even the cosplay covers, which credit has to go to Zenescope. They're the ones who came up with the cosplay thing first.
Actually, do you want to know who really created the cosplay variant?
I do, Dennis. I love comic book history.
Me and Francesco.
Oh, here we go.
2010.
Yeah.
Here we go.
2010. Francesco actually made our special VIP only cosplay variant for a Zenescope Monster Hunter Survival Guide. Everybody go online and look it up on eBay. And he basically wanted a cosplayer with all of these extra things. And he went through legal and he talked to a buddy at Marvel and he talked to a buddy at DC. And he's like, yeah, we don't have a problem with that. Go ahead and do it. So the first official cosplay variant was Francesco doing it for me in 2010. And then all of a sudden, Zenescope was like, oh, well, we got away with that one. And then it kind of escalated from there.
But like you said, now it's like I look at stuff and I'm like, holy crap, like these guys aren't, like that is Jean Grey.
Yeah.
Like if you look at like Harley Quinn, I was like, anybody who's worked with me, I was like, you got to flip her colors. Where Harley Quinn is red, Harley Quinn is black, where she's black, she's red. You know, you always have to have the triangles under the eyes. Like, you know, ours, you know, it's a parody. It says Mommy's Little Demon, where obviously Harley is, you know, Daddy's Little Monster. Like, there's stuff that you have to do. But guys get hell fuck now.
Yes.
You know, like they're just like here's, I don't know how many Savage Land rogues I've seen with the X right on the chest. They're like, dude, like take off the X. Like people are still going to know you're trying to sell, you know, rogue. There's a guy who all of a sudden's been doing Scotty Young covers. I'm like, this looks exactly like the Marvel version. Like you changed like 0.5%. Like, this looks exactly, I think that's the problem. And look, it's going to burn everybody eventually because somebody somewhere is going to get pissed off and go like, all right, you've gone too far. And all of a sudden it's going to affect everybody's cosplay covers. But, you know.
Yep. There you go. This is a perfect example of what you're talking about right here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Scotty Young.
And it's literally, it's literally like, you know, like I said, it's, you know, it's been said many times. You gotta know the rules before you break any of them.
Yeah.
And these guys don't know.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring that up because I know, you know, I've been really harsh on these in the past, and you're the guy that's in a lot of minds is right on that line, if not slightly over in their mind. But you do it right by
you follow the law,
adhering to it.
Well,
I've done a few where I was like I wish I could take that one back. Like after like a week of, I go, that one might have been a little too far. Also, the other thing we try to stay away is anything like super nasty. Like we'll do a nasty, naughty, and nice, but it won't be a cosplay cover because that's the red light. Like that's where Marvel and DC and any IP holder, you know, that's you know that
you're kind of poking the bear.
Again,
right. Yeah, I mean, I've had covers I've approached you with, and you've said no, we can't do it. I mean, it becomes a desire to do it. But I think the one thing that we have to differentiate from you and others is you're not mass marketing this. You're not, you know, doing XYZ and XYZ. Even with me, I think I've done 20 covers with you. We've found that easy. Okay, we're then do 4 covers of Iron Maiden. Why? Because I'm an Iron Maiden fan. Okay, we'll make 50 copies. It doesn't harm anybody, right? But when you start mass marketing to everybody and not letting them know what they're getting, I think that's where we get this crossover, right? And so, and not to put you on the spot here, but how many different Do You Poohs have you done? And this is I know this is on the spot.
No. But I'm guessing if we're not there already, we're almost at 3,000 variants.
Wow.
Right.
That's amazing.
Right.
But again, retailers are what build this brand.
Yep.
You know, Jesse, we work together. The one thing I will say I'm super proud of is not getting too greedy, not mass marketing, not trying to do a clothing line or toys. Like, I understood I'm doing a parody book and there's lines you don't cross. They usually are like, like red flags to IP owners. And we were like, I'm not doing any of that. I've been approached, hey, we want to license You Pooh to do like, well, you can do t-shirts like this, but I'm not going to let you put a freaking, Marvel parody for me, on a t-shirt. Because that's eyeballs on me. So between not getting too greedy and, working with retailers, because my business is built on everybody making money. I make my cut. My books aren't the cheapest to do, but my minimums are the best in the industry.
Yeah, and their quality.
And just so you guys know about Marat has delivered my books to me at Sizzlers. He has taken it to me at the store. I mean, that's how Marat is.
On behalf of everybody on this show, I'm sorry Jesse forced you to eat at Sizzlers.
Not eat at Sizzlers, but he's delivering.
I do it from outside.
Yeah.
No, you know what? Again, this is just understanding. Like we talked about, I started out as an comics rookie, 19 years old. You start your career up here. You're getting paid tremendously for a 19-year-old. You've all this fanfare. You go, oh, this is amazing. Like, where's my career going to go from here?
Right.
And then, 3 years later, I'm 4 years later, I'm for work. The bottom of the whole industry has dropped off. A lot of the image guys, and I've heard this from, people working at Marvel and DC. Oh yeah, they like your work, but they don't want to use any of the image guys. I've heard that. So, bounce around for 15 plus years. When you see something that's connecting and working, I appreciate it, because I still to this day go, this could all end tomorrow, and if it was, what an amazing ride, right?
Right.
Like when it ends, then I'll contact the Guinness Book of World Records and go, it's not even close. I hold the record for most variants.
Right. Well, and just so you folks know, Marat does have 2 Guinness Book of World Records. You know that, right? Because you did the book that we did with Rob in Amazing Con. So don't forget, you already have 2 Guinness Book of World Records.
It's go ahead.
Well, I did. So and I'm not going to get too far on myself here for a second, but in 1996, I made the front page of the Wall Street Journal for selling toys. The Wall Street Journal had never heard of, collectible toys, toy scalping, etc. But that led to me doing this interview with Canadian television Marketplace. And they did like a 30-minute expose on me and, my business. And in it, I had this great quote. And I'll give it to you one of these days, Brian. You could clip it. And this is baby-faced 25-year-old Dennis with my hat backwards and full brown beard. And I'm like, if this all ends tomorrow, who gets to say that they play with toys every day? And for me, that was just like this quote that just encapsulates what I saw my life and career doing. And you've gotten to do that since 12.
Yeah.
And Jesse's done it since 12. And I've been reading comics and playing with toys since I was 12. And that's one of the great things about this world that we're all in, is we can choose a path and we can navigate that path into something that just makes us happy. And at the end, if it all ended tomorrow, if the eclipse blinded us from the comet and it all ended tomorrow, the last thought that went through our head is, damn, we had a fun life.
Yeah.
Dude, 1,000%.
Yep.
I mean, I feel blessed every day. And I also, I worked at the comic book store. After that, I had, before I was Rob's assistant, I worked at McDonald's flipping burgers and worked, cash register. I worked at a doctor's office doing filings and delivering documents all across the city, and those sucked. So like I always have that perspective of like, you could have a real job. Like you should appreciate this because you've gotten to be a kid your whole life.
Yeah.
Like you said, and I just I know how blessed I am. Also, the older you get, you appreciate different things, as you guys know. I just love being at a convention, and even if people walk by and they just crack up looking at the Pooh stuff. They're like, "Oh my God, it's Pooh as freaking Freddy Krueger. That's so funny," and they laugh and they enjoy it. And even if they walk away without buying anything, but like, I did something that put a smile on people's faces.
Yeah.
The fans of the Pooh stuff, they love it. It they enjoy collecting it. So it's freaking awesome that I make a good living, can't complain, better than most people. And again, I know what it's like struggling in this industry looking for work. I make a great living. I'm on my own time. I do what I want to do. There's literally, I'll wake up some days and go, I just feel like drawing this cover, and I draw it. And I go, I'll stick it, go on the schedule somewhere. And, 90% of the time, some retailer will hit me up like a couple of months and go, hey, have you ever done this cover? And I'll go, well, we haven't printed it, but actually, if you want it, it's finished. Here it is.
Right.
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that because there's some questions in here, and we want to get some chat questions answered before we let you go here. But one of the questions that we get a lot about Do You Pooh stuff, over here at Beyond Wednesdays, we have all kinds of shows for the comic book collector, and we talk a lot about secondary market sales and hot comics of the week on this because of secondary market sales and stuff like that. And your Do You Pooh stuff comes up pretty often, but one of the things that gets asked a lot, and Igor Volkov says this: I have a bunch of Do You Pooh books, but I don't know when they come out, when they can't come out. Most comic tracking sites don't have over 50% of their releases. Is there a site or a form that we can access to be able to check? And basically, I'll say that I'll change that question a little bit. Is there a place, or do you have a list of all the Pooh variants you've done and the dates and who you did them with?
I'll be honest, I don't. Again, this just kind of happened. It wasn't a plan. I wish I could say, oh, I saw this opening in the comic book industry and I had this plan. It just happened, and it kept growing and growing and growing. And it's, I'm pretty much, I have people that are in place that help out, but, I still work from a home office, and, I do a lot of my own fulfillment, and
that's
as
cool.
Jesse told you, I'm very hands-on because I'm like, I don't want to be a supermarket. I'm a mom and pop shop. That's what I am. I'm not a franchise. I'm a mom and pop shop. And we don't release through Diamond because we do such tiny print runs. So it really, at some point, if you guys see me disappear from, the public for about 2 months, that just means I finally took the time to go through all my files and, finally make that master list.
Well,
the thing too is, funny enough, like I've literally had people bring up covers that I go, I forgot I even drew this thing. Like,
Right, yeah.
Probably 792 out of 3,000.
So actually, Igor had a better question way up in the chat, and I actually made a note to go back to it. Hey, Marat, I'm sure in all of the years of the industry, you worked with top artists and even during your comic book store business, you worked with some of the top artists and writers. Is there someone that you always wanted to work with that's still alive but didn't as of yet, or somebody who passed away that you had the chance and you missed that little time window?
So it would have to be Terry Austin because he's retired, but Terry Austin inking his inks through the 70s through the mid 80s was just like anything he touched, he leveled up. And even when I pencil, like Terry Austin's line work, that's what's always in my head. Not the Pooh stuff, any of the straightforward stuff. it's Terry Austin. He's the one guy I was like, if I could have worked with Prime Terry, that would have been it. Otherwise, yeah, it'd be cool to do something with Frank Miller because I'm a huge fan. That would have been awesome. Character-wise, I love Knight. He's always been underserviced.
Agree.
I think there's some great stuff that can be done with him, but at this point, when people are like, "Are you ever think about going back to Marvel and DC?" Even if they'll have me, I'm like, "Well, why would I want to take a pay cut?" Like,
yes.
I live this awesome life. Like, why would I want to, be stressed out and, and get paid less and not be able to tell the story you want to tell anyway?
Yeah, amen. Amen. Yeah.
Yeah, you think your page rate was amazing for back in the 90s. Adjust that for inflation and see what Marvel pays now.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I talked to some of my buddies who work in Marvel in DC. First You Pooh cover was the Dark Pooh Returns. It was Dark Pooh Returns. It was a Dark Knight #1 parody.
wow. When did you do that?
We're 9 years ago.
9
It was
years ago.
the Amazing Arizona Comic-Con.
Amazing.
And we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Wow. 10-year anniversary of Do You Pooh?
Isn't that nuts?
That
Isn't
is
that
crazy.
absolutely crazy?
That's
Like,
well, when you
it's
said
insane.
how many you thought you did, that blew me away too. I really think that, we have, like Dennis said, we've talked about the whole IP issue very hot and heavy lately because it's been, a big part of the comic book, talk behind the scenes. And your book has always come up in that conversation. But I think what's different between you and anybody else that does the parody covers or the parody work, that's not your only work. You have been a part of this industry and a part of major publishing giants and been a giant in this industry way before that. And people realize that. You know what I mean? So I think that's super important. So
I get like people who I've met at conventions and have, met numerous times throughout the years, and they buy all the Pooh stuff. And one day they'll go, I was going through my local comic book store and I picked up, and it'll be like a Hawk and Dove from DC or, freaking Brigade. And I'll be like, I didn't even realize that you had a career before the Pooh stuff. I thought you just did the Pooh stuff.
I'm gonna blow your mind here right now. So I bought that mega collection of Good Girl, Bad Girl art, where I got all those really great books. Brian and Jesse, you probably saw it on my Instagram. And in the middle of it was a Marat Mychaels convention sketch 2001 Avengelyne. And so I sent that to CBCS to get verified about a month ago. And literally while we were prepping for this show this morning, I got a notification that it has been graded and I will have it in my hands.
Nice.
But it's freaking gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
And I sent it in.
I hate convention sketches. I hate drawing at conventions. I like being in my own area.
Hey, Marat, before you go, I want to ask you this very important question because we live in a world of social media. It's social driven. Who was taking the pictures in the 90s? Who was orchestrating that? Because I think you're basically the first group who socially were known because of Wizard Magazine and all these other magazines.
And the trading cards. And the trading cards.
The Extreme Universe book that came out.
Who was bringing you guys together to take those pictures? Or those were just, hey, let's just take pictures?
No, those were, again, I give credit where credit is due. Those were Rob's ideas. I think he understood that Levi commercial gave him a platform. And, part of it was that America in general realized comic book artists aren't 400-pound black, bearded guys sitting in their mother's basement dressed in all black, drawing comic books. They saw this young, kid who looks like a California surfer, and he's one of the most successful comic book artists. And so what we had in our studio is, first of all, we had, a rainbow of creators. We had, white guys, Asian guys, black guys, Hispanic guys. We had, culturally, and we all loved each other. We didn't see race. We enjoyed each other's company. We had the same passions, the same loves. So that was great. And then we had, looking young kids, Dan Frago would look like, one of the Backstreet Boys. And, Danny Mickey, like he stepped off a stage with his long hair, and same with Norm Rapman, and then we had, guys like Jeff Matsuda, who was this super athletic, 6'3", Asian kid.
And Greg Capullo before he could lift any of us.
So I think like we had, aesthetically, we were a relatively pleasing group.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, Andy Parks, another guy. But also, we understood, and Rob really understood, that the fans wanted to know more about you. They wanted to feel connected to you beyond just the work.
Well, and I'll tell you what, you know who buries all of you guys in looks is Michael Turner. I mean, my God, I'm the furthest thing from gay, but I mean, fuck, Mike was just gorgeous.
Oh, trust me, I've been out with Mike a couple of times in the 90s, and I was like, oh, no girls are looking at me tonight,
The best damn pool player on the entire convention circuit. He would grab me and we would go to an after-hours pool bar in Philadelphia at like 2 a.m. and play pool till 4.
One of the things that I want to remind everybody is that you guys can find Marat conventions. He's always doing conventions. He's talked about his love for conventions. But last Friday, I think it was last Friday. Or no, it was the Friday before last. I got to see you along with our good friend of the channel, Drew Lujan from Wanted Comics, on eBay Live, and you guys sat and did sales. You remarked some books, and it was an excellent live sale, man.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, I mean, I've done, I've done a ton of Whatnot sales. I've now done a couple of eBay Live sales. It's just another great avenue. I'm not a fan of social media because I think there's so much, so many just people who just want to complain. Sure. But what I do love about it is that it does allow you to connect with people. And live sales is another great way to just sit there and, look at the chat and respond to questions. And, especially with people who I'm buddies with. Drew is a guy I'm buddies with. Those sales are real natural. It's just us having a conversation. Older I get, the more, I don't give a fuck. I just if I haven't been canceled yet, I'm not going to get canceled because I don't have any deep, dark secrets in my past.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to come back to bite me in the ass.
Well, you're always welcome here, man. Always welcome here. Fuck that cancel culture shit.
Like I said, if I've been canceled over Naughty and Nice, I'm not getting canceled.
But you're an island unto yourself, and you deal with the retailers who want to deal with you. So that's kind of cancel culture insulation.
Again, what I pride myself is on, I am the easiest way to do your first variant. I don't know how many retailers I've talked to. They're like, oh, I did my first variant with you because we're relatively cheap buy-in. We're the cheapest buy-in. I deal with you personally. Even my art fee is, downgraded when you do one of my variants because I'm like, well, I'll make money as the publisher, so I'm not going to try to.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what. I'm going to reach out to you after this because I think I want to bring you out to Detroit area and do a variant with you to have an in-store signing very soon.
Let's do it. I'm in.
All right.
I haven't been to Detroit in a decade.
You mentioned the Avengelyne Omnibus. Where can people find more information about that?
We are on my social media. We are going to be posting Kickstarter link so you can sign up. We're launching it next Wednesday. 100%,
Awesome.
Isn't
it's a
that
counterpoint.
Yeah,
it's a licensing thing.
Go ahead.
Freaking, it's freaking cool. And again, it's always like this awesome full circle moment to Rob calls me to ask about business advice, or when we work out a deal and I can license his characters. It's like such a cool thing because it's like, he's a buddy, he was a mentor, he was a boss. Like we've had this full circle relationship.
And it goes to what Jesse and I have been saying this entire duration of these shows. You build these alliances, you build this, this crew that you're working with. If let's just say Marvel or anybody else came to Rob and said, hey, we'd like to license, he might say no, but it's you going to Rob. And Rob's like, well, no, I trust you to do it the way I want it done. Go.
Well, and that was the thing. We, like I said, there's been 2 years in the works because it's more than just Avengelyne. This is just the first one. He's very particular. He wanted handled. We went back and forth. We finally got, the deal banged out and just in time for the movie announcement, which is Kismet, because it was like we literally 2 weeks ago, right after WonderCon, I go to Rob's house and spend that whole following Monday with him. And I was like, let's hammer this deal out. Let's, dot the I's, cross the T's, and let's make this happen. Yeah. And he was like, all right, well, this movie thing is going to happen sooner or later. And I was like, well, then it's perfect timing. Like, This has always been our first one we were going to do. We worked out the particulars on everything else, and boom. There you go. So,
and what I think is great about this is a full circle thing, because I remember this guy calling me on the phone and said, I want to launch my first Kickstarter at your store. And I'm like, okay. And this guy comes to the store and he says, I think I need 3 6-foot tables instead of 2. Oh, I think I'm going to get pizza. Right. And now to see where Marat is doing right now, this omnibus, from him not even knowing how many 6-foot tables he wanted to do at a store for his first Kickstarter. And you had all your buddies come in, right? Your 10, 15 buddies come in and hang out. And it's crazy.
No friends show up. So, I always, I operate from a position of a healthy fear of failure. So, no matter how much success, I wake up every morning and go, you got to work twice as hard today than you did yesterday, because you don't want to be, I was here for a minute. And again, I just, also, like I keep saying, I realize 30-year career in comics is insane. Like not a lot of guys can say, and I've been blessed, and, I've made awesome friends, great business associates that I've become, buddies with, and, just get to do what I love, and like if it all ended tomorrow, I'm like, all right, cool. This was a phenomenal ride. I've, put myself in a position where I didn't waste all my money. So, if I have to ride into the sunset, I'm not going to have to be 75 years old and
there you go.
At a convention sketches. I understand the blessing that it is, and,
yeah, hell yeah.
I appreciate it.
Well,
awesome.
We'll bring you on when we get closer to this, and anytime you ever want to come on to talk about any projects you got going on, you always got a seat welcome for you on this channel. So appreciate you, Marat.
This has been a blast. Thank you guys for having me.
All right, man. Much love. We'll talk to you soon. All right. Man, that was awesome. That was, you can't get much better than getting an announcement the night he's going to be on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had Rob the week before the announcement. We had Marat already scheduled the week after. There's so much synchronicity with the people that we want to talk to going on, because they intrigue us as much as they're still relevant in the industry. And then when you start putting them into place and you put the round pegs in the square holes and all of that of building these shows, and then you're like, oh, he's not just the You Pooh guy. He's got this career spanning and now you find out, 42 years, just like
42
Jesse.
years. Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, we get to introduce Marat to a group of people who only thought he was the Pooh guy, and didn't know about his image days. And I don't think was anybody on this panel not surprised when he said he worked at Golden Apple when he was 12.
No.
Yeah, and like, so we all got something fresh out of this.
Yeah.
Well, it was very interesting because how synchronicity works. I always love bringing up synchronicity. He brought it up as kismet. It's a wonderful idea, and it seems to follow me as well. But we have been talking a lot lately about the IP thing in comics, and people having to deal with that, whether it's knowing what the law is, following that line, being vocal about not overstepping that line. And we have another creator who's very deals in that category pretty heavily too. Jesse, why don't you go ahead and introduce our next guest to Industry
the next
Comics?
guest has been in the public eye for 12, 13 years now. I have known him as one of his first retailers, where he just pulled up and said, "Hey, I got these comics in back of my truck. Do you think you can put them in your store?" And of course, and we've had this great, not just being awesome friends, this great partnership with a great creator who has been a trailblazer in his field and has always been able to find that next step up. So we have Tom Hutchison from Big Dog Inc. up next.
Thanks, Tom, for joining us. How you doing, brother? Good to see you.
Of course, I appreciate it. Yeah, it was good time. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and just thank you for staying patiently, because we usually schedule the guests in these 1 hour blocks, and then when Marat's just going a mile a minute, we had to go over because we just couldn't stop the brakes on that one. So we appreciate you hanging over in the chat.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah,
he was probably watching replays of the greatest plays of the Chargers season last year or something like that. So he was fine.
I just started a re-binge of Seinfeld, so I'm on episode 5. That's what I was doing prior.
For people that don't know about Tom and what he does, you probably heard of his brand, his publishing company, Big Dog Inc., who we talk a lot about on this channel. Again, being a channel that kind of grew from the speculation market and looking at books on the secondary market and what they sell for, there are certain books that pop up quite often that you aren't seeing like tons of sales of them, but when a sale pops up, they go for a ton of money. And you have so many amazing variant covers by just amazing artists that show up on eBay sold lists for outrageous money that are so limited, super limited. And you've kind of taken that track of, producing these like limited series and the Kickstarter stuff also. Talk about how what you did to decide to create Big Dog Inc. and how that started.
I did it. Big Dog Inc. happened because I got fired. Basically, let's just cut to the chase. Not so much fired. I was fired, but basically, for a long time, I was working in a sports card shop, the biggest sports card shop in America. We had accounts with NASCAR, NFL, MLB, all that stuff. We were selling cards on their websites. And so I was in charge of that division that we turned from, I was working with my then wife at the time, and we turned that division from $50,000 a year to $300,000 a year, because we came in and we just worked together and built this up. But as the as we rolled into that recession that we had in like 2008, 9, and the housing bubble and all that kind of stuff happened, I got laid off of that job because people were realizing they didn't need to buy 3-inch pieces of cardboard during recession. So I got laid off of that job. But at the time, I had started trying to figure out, like, how could I do comics on my own? Like, originally back in the day, I wanted to be an artist. So I was drawing all the time, trying to figure out, like, can I even do this? And the answer was no, really, to be honest. I kind of was getting good at it, but not really truly. I mean, once I got to the point where I was like, look, I can draw a figure, but now I got to draw horses and cars and trees and like lifetime left in me to do all of that. But that's when I fell back into the writing side of it. So I had created this character Critter in the back of business class in 1992 because I got bored out of my mind in business class. And I was drawing her over and over and over again because that's how you learn how to draw comics. You draw the same thing over and over again. It has to look the same. And so when I got to a point where I was like, well, maybe I could write a story, I picked Critter. I was like, let me see what I could do with this superhero idea because I didn't know how to write a script. I didn't know what a script was. I didn't know how to write a comic book. Everything that I know about comics is osmosis of basically, at that point, 30 some odd years of collecting and reading comics.
Yep, being a fan.
Yeah, just total fan. And so I kind of started to figure out like, okay, who is she? What does she do? Where does she come from? Is this a superhero story? Is this a sci-fi story? Like, what are we going to do? And I just started tinkering with it. And it went through a lot of different sort of like I said, is it pure superhero? Is it sci-fi? Like, what is this thing? And it went through a lot of different variations until we finally kind of landed on this really what I call kind of classic superhero stuff. Because I grew up with comics basically 70s and 80s. That's where it really started heavy for me. So it was Superman, it was Batman, it was Wonder Woman. It was the classics. And so when we got to kind of start to polish this Critter character in this story, it went very much back into my osmosis of what was I reading back in the time. And so it's very spandex, it's very Secret Identity, it's very utility belt, and it's got a nice mix of science fiction things that go with it. There's some time travel elements, there's some parallel universes and stuff, and all of it was really built into the very first issue. And then since then, we're now 14 years later. Since then, we've expanded on those little nuggets that we dropped in the very first issue into this huge thing that we now call the Critterverse, which is really just her story still, except that her story has become kind of expansive through her own book and then through some spin-off series that we've done. And so the Critterverse has become, actually that was coined by Vince Hernandez at Aspen. I have to give him credit for that because
shout out to Vince.
Yeah, I didn't have the Critterverse in mind.
Dropped enough, yeah.
Yeah, he was at San Diego Comic-Con talking to somebody, and he turned to me and he was like, "What do you think of the Critterverse?" And I was like, "God damn, that's amazing. How do we make that happen?" And so years later, I finally get to use this term, this Critterverse, and now we're really expanding the entire concept of Critter, her world, the other characters, and that's where it all started. And then of course it rolled into things like Penny for Your Soul and Legend of Oz: The Wicked West, Ursa Minor, Scheherazade, and so on.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. So we talked to a lot of young up and coming creators, and they've taken this new business model of short batch books and whatnot. But I don't know if you remember the first time we met was at I think it was Wizard World, Chicago, maybe 2009, but it was probably 2010.
No, it would have. We didn't even start till 2010, so it would have been like 12. Okay. Yeah.
But that was the year that I was promoting Detroit Fanfare, and I was also a retailer, and I bought literally, I think I spent $200 or $300 on just your entire volume, and I have so much of that left, just in my archives. And you were fully formed, and I want to talk to you about how you approached Big Dog Inc. I mean, you literally had a big dog persona on the convention circuit your first year.
And now I wear cat ears. Yeah, it's a weird world, man. It's a weird world.
No, but walk us through you and deciding, okay, I've lost this other job, but now I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to make these comic books. And you understood the variant market from Jump Street, and that's always impressed me with you, Tom. So just
I think that's the only thing I understood. I was clueless, to be perfectly honest. I was clueless about what I was doing. Like I said, everything was osmosis. So it was just sort of what I saw translated into what I did, and I hoped that it made sense. And somehow we got really, really lucky with our first releases. Penny for Your Soul came out; it sold out at at retail. We did a second print immediately. We got really lucky, to be perfectly honest. But the variant thing came along partially because of Jimmy J Company Comics.
Yep.
He reached out to me when we were doing Penny for Your Soul, and he was like, "Are you going to do variants?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know where or when or how. Obviously, when we do cons, we're going to do that." But he was like, "Well, this is what we do, and we do some variants on your books and so on and so on." And
well, and a lot of people don't understand. J Company was the king of the convention variant and small batch variants back in those days.
Yeah,
He
was working with Zenoscope and Cave Woman and all that kind of stuff. So he reached out to us. I didn't know who he was. He reached out to us. And he was like, "Oh, hey, so this is what we do." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's cool." And so he did variants on our very first issue, Penny for Your Soul #1, Penny for Your Soul #2. And then I think our first variant, actually our first variant was #2. We went to Heroes Con and I had variants for Heroes Con. And then we were kind of off to the races at that point. But, I always understood, because I came, weirdly, I'm a writer now, but I came into comics from the art side. I understood the art side of comics. I understood what I was seeing on the page. I understood what I was seeing on the covers. I understood that art was first. And even now, I tell people, art carries comics. And that's not to disparage writers in any capacity, but art carries comics now, and it really has for a long, long time. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was, do some of these variants. And we didn't do a ton of them, but like when we ever hit a con, we'd be like, well, let's have a New York Comic Con exclusive. Let's have a Heroes Con exclusive, whatever it is. And, I would just reach out to people and I'd be like, hey, this is kind of what we want to do. And the artists really latched on to what we were doing. We had Nia Rufino's first ever cover for in comics. After that, I was like, "Do you want to do more?" She was like, "Yeah." So we put her on Legend of Oz, and she's done a cover for Legend of Oz for every single issue we've ever done. Even when it was reprinted at Aspen, she came back and did more Oz covers. So she's been just is huge for us over the years.
Well, that leads us to, so when I was putting together my convention, Detroit Fanfare, I met you in 2010 at Wizard World, and I said, "Hey, we're doing this show," and I kind of was like spelling it out to you about what I was wanting to do with it. And you were like, "Oh, no, I got it perfect. We got this new girl, Natalie Sanders, and we'll bring you bring her to the show. We'll show up to the show. We'll do this variant for you." I think you did 2 variants. I think you did a Critters and a
we had
an
her,
Oz.
and I think we had we might have had a Jen Broomall one or something at the time.
Yeah. But what it was is you understood what I wanted my show to be special.
Sure.
And you were already doing this, so that's why you and I vibed as early as I was in that realm.
Yep.
And then as I saw Big Dog Inc. was this kind of hot catch fire, publisher, that made me as the retailer also support you and support your entire product line. But you understood that, and not just because of me, but you understood one is better than none. You could have totally flopped at my show, but you didn't. And now, and Brian, I put it in the chat there. One of the variants you did for me early on is considered to be one of the hottest Big Dog Inc. variants.
Absolutely.
So, that was my first convention variant. And early on for you
guys, saying $45.
Yeah,
that's the reprint that's the print that Natalie does.
Oh, the print. Okay, I was going to say I need to go buy that book.
I was going to say go down. You'll see that's the foil variant.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that
man.
book runs raw easily $100 to $200.
Exactly.
Pretty regularly.
Yep.
It was a great piece. Natalie was new at the time. We had found her at Phoenix Comic Con. Her husband had come by with her portfolio, and he was like, "Well, this is my wife's stuff." And I was like looking at it, and I'm like, "Well, where is she?" She was like, "Well, she doesn't really like to come into these things." And I was like, "I need to talk to her." And so he brought her in the next day, and we talked, and I was like, "This is amazing. we're going to give you work, like right now on the spot. We're going to give you work. And she was another one that just kind of came out of the blue. Jen Broomall sort of came out of the blue. We've had a lot of guys that and gals that
her stuff
starting.
for Ursa Minor. Was it?
Yeah.
Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Her stuff for that was blowing everybody out of the water.
Yeah.
It was gothic. It was. I mean, it's all of her work now, but that was the first time I'd seen her, and I'm like, done. Yeah, in fact, give me 3 or 4 of each of these, and yeah, we're good. Let's do it.
I need to ask.
She had a Zenoscope cover prior to us. That was her first ever cover, and it didn't click, I guess, with them, and so she was just looking for more work, and I was like, 100%, we're going to do this.
Well, I got to ask then real quick because, like I said, we always ask this, and you brought up Neo Rufino. What was her first cover?
Her first cover, well, okay, so caveat. Her first ever cover was for Zenoscope. I don't know what the book was, but it was all digital, okay? It was completely digital. And so her first drawn cover, like pencil to paper, was Penny for Your Soul number 4. Or wait, was it 4 or was it 6? Oh, I'd have to figure that out. I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's 6. It's got to be 6. Yeah.
We'll take a look real quick. I've got Penny for Your Soul up right now. Let's go take a look at number 6.
And basically it was a cover with 2 angels, an angel and devil girl kind of in the bed. And the angel is kind of waking up like, oh my God, what just happened?
This is art. This is art, YouTube. This is art.
Yeah, that was Monty Moore. You just went by there. Monty Moore had an early variant for us too. So, there was a lot of stuff. Like Eric Basildua was our first variant, and that was for Jimmy J. And then Nei, of course, colored it. And then we just started finding people to do things. Mike DeBalfo did one for us early. Oh my gosh, Corey Knable did a bunch of stuff for us.
Well, and that's what I wanted to talk about was, you found a lot of some of the earliest talent. You would probably share some of that talent with Zenoscope because I think you both were discovering certain people. But what were you looking for out of an artist at that time that made you pick some of the hottest artists in the nation?
I mean, like I said, I came from art. I used to actually be an art dealer for a while, like original art, flipping pages and stuff. So I feel like I just had an artistic sense of everything. And I've had people tell me about that with the books, not even the covers, but the insides. They're like, how are you getting what you're getting from these guys that no one's ever heard of before? And I'm like, because I understand, again, osmosis of comics. I know I'm a rookie, but I know enough that I can say panel 1, panel 2, fix this, turn that, whatever it is. And then we get something cool at the end. And I think one of the greatest things about us doing comics for 14 years and these books continuing on is if you go back to the beginning, like if you go back to Penny for Your Soul number 1, and then you look at the most recent Penny for Your Soul, it's the same artist. JB Netto and I are like this. He has not left the book. And you can watch his evolution through all of these issues. He's done like 28 issues of this book. There it is.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool to watch all of these guys evolve, with me down the years. FICO Osio on Critter, he was the primary Critter artist until we went over to Aspen. And when I went over to Aspen, he went over to IDW. So he was doing Transformers and Mask and, all that kind of stuff. Spider-Man for them over there. And so I'm like, God damn, that's just fantastic. In fact, I have his mouse pad right here. So FICO was amazing. I loved that guy. And he did like 20 issues of Critter for us. So we had really good artists, but we also had guys that were dedicated to the books. So we had a long line of continuity artistically inside the books, which is super important because that's so hard to do nowadays. To get somebody on like 12 issues of a book, it's nearly impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you hit your deadlines pretty often too.
Somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, we were never perfect, but we were really trying. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the one thing when you came into the business, and I think we probably started about the same time, because I think I was still at the original spot, right? Wasn't I at the original store when you first walked in?
Yes.
Yeah, I was at the original store down the street.
The one next to Denny's.
Yeah, the one next to Denny's, right? Yeah,
That's when that's when I first met you.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think at that
and I was there for
time-
Phoenix Comic Con, I think is what happened. And I was just like, well, I'm going to go see all the shops around here.
Yeah,
and I drove up and I was like, hey, I'm nobody.
Yeah.
You want some comics?
Yeah. And but I think from 2010 to 2014, there was this social reach that we had as far as everybody went to dinner together. Mm-hmm. Everybody socialized together. And I think as we have evolved into what we're in now, where we're like what we're doing now, the four of us in 4 different states talking. Well, back in 2010, 2014, we were sitting all at a table. Mm-hmm. So there's this separation. So 2010 through 2014, when you see the group of creators, those were also creators you were having dinner with that night. And I think there's a big difference of how you build that power, thinking of how to make these great covers or these great interiors.
There was a point where everything became a clique.
Yep.
And, Big Dog was a clique, Zenoscope was a clique, whoever, right? Aspen was a clique. And while there was some general crossover, it was pretty much when the end of the con happened, every clique went to wherever it is that they were going to go. And it wasn't like Big Dog ended up with Aspen or Aspen ended up with Zenoscope. Like everybody clicked up. And I don't know exactly why that is.
Tribalism.
I have a sense that part of it is, this might sound weird, but people started becoming exclusive at companies as well, and so they didn't want the interaction because they didn't want somebody saying, "Hey, how do I get Ebas on my cover?" Well, no, he's exclusive with us. Well, how do I get this guy? Well, no, they didn't want that, and so that's where things kind of started to
and it was
really
very
bubble up.
It was very short-sighted, and I know I talked to a lot of those artists during that time. It's like, man, I'd love to, but as long as they keep feeding me work. Yeah. And then, and it goes back to also, there was an oversaturation around that point as well, because they were trying to feed so many of these creators to keep them into their roster that they didn't need to go look anywhere else. And they would
but at the same time, the saturation was because everybody was at every con, everywhere, every weekend. Yeah. And so, there was that all was before the internet really was flying, because a con exclusive at that point truly was a con exclusive. You would go, you'd make a couple hundred copies, you'd sell out, you'd go home. But as the cons started to change and the attendee base started to change from Comic-Con collectors or comic book collectors to I'm here to get Tom Holland's autograph, as that started to change, sales started to change. And so what happened was a lot of these Comic-Con exclusives just ended up on the website after the end of the Comic-Con. And so a lot of fans just kind of were like, oh, wait a minute, I don't even have to go to the con because I can get it after the con because it'll be on the website. Now, sure, occasionally things would still sell out, certainly. But there was definitely a switch in that. And more books were ending up, hey, here's our leftover books from Emerald City, whatever. And people in New York could get them without having to go to Emerald City. And so that started to change.
Well, it made it less special at that time, too.
I mean, to a degree, yes. Because, again, you're not going to the place, you're not meeting the artist, you're not getting the signature. So, yes. But that's the internet, right? The internet despecialized everything.
Yes.
Because now, like Jesse just said, we're in 4 different places in the country. Talking to people who are in 1,000 different places in the country. So it kind of despecialized everything. It's sort of like streaming on TV. It used to be that you got to watch The Wizard of Oz once a year whenever TV decided to play it. Now it's just on Amazon, or you can buy the Blu-ray and pop it in anytime you want. So everything's shifting, and it's the internet's fault.
Yeah. One of the things that you're also that I know a lot of people know Big Dog Inc. for is having some of the best J. Scott Campbell variants out there. Like, how did you create this relationship with J. Scott Campbell? And I mean, some great covers from JSC.
This was done through Brett Kate, who was working with Scott at the time at his booth on occasion and so on. And Brett used to do variants with us. And so at one point he was like, well, I want to get Scott to do a variant. And he did an Oz variant for us, which was super popular, super crazy. And then that's it right there. And then after that, Brett and I were talking about building a new IP, and it was all over the place. Like he had these ideas and I had these, and it wasn't matching up. And it was kind of a like, how do we do this? Like, what's going to happen? And out of all of that came Scheherazade. And so when we finally figured out what Scheherazade is, Brett basically was like, yeah, why don't we get Scott to do the covers for this first arc? And I was like, well, yeah, I'm not going to say no to that. So it was done through Brett. And then, of course, I talked to Scott at cons as well, but he was the impetus for all of that and the contact. And
Brett's another one of those guys that doesn't get enough love in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was great. I mean, Blue Rainbow Comics. I don't know if he's still doing things anymore. I know he does a lot with Sora Sung now.
Yeah.
But for a while, for a number of years, he was doing Blue Rainbow and he was doing a lot of covers. But these were just regular B covers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like that was just your B cover. Like it wasn't a retail incentive. It was just here's your B cover for $5 or whatever. And yeah, it was really popular. It put us on the map. It was our best-selling book ever. For that series, beating out The Legend of Oz. And, obviously we know why, because J. Scott Campbell's going to put eyeballs on your book. But, it did create eyeballs on us as a whole. And so, so people would come in with the Scott Campbell covers and be like, oh, well, what else does Big Dog Inc. do? And then they'd trickle down into some of the other stuff.
I don't want you to take offense at this, but you definitely know that you're what I call a low tier publisher. You got the big two, and then you got the mid tiers, but you shined as a low tier publisher. I just didn't want you to take offense at that term.
Dude, I tell people I'm a low tier. I tell people I'm at the bottom of the rung. Like, I understand.
Right.
And these are the things you do to shine as that low tier.
Sure, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. I think I was very lucky, right? I was very lucky to get Ebass. I was very lucky to get Nei. I was very lucky to get Mike. And then I was lucky / good enough to find people like Jen Broomall, Natalie Sanders, Ian Snyder, on and on and on.
What about Shannon Mayer?
Shannon Mayer, yeah, that's another one, Shannon Mayer.
But what I want to talk to you about is like publishing expectations from the retail level. So Jesse and I know that aspect of it, but what I don't know is your aspect of it. So you're doing print runs, and you're doing Penny for Your Soul, and you're doing Critter. And so what was like a standard print run like at the beginning when you started adding J. Scott to the mix for retail? And then, where did it peak for you? Like at what point did it hit like a peak? And then kind of where did you see like a dip that made you shift gears? So like that's kind of a 3-part question.
To where we shifted gears. We had almost no attrition rate on our books whatsoever.
Okay.
I won't say zero, but it wasn't normally, you'll sell 50,000 of the one and then 25,000 of the number two, and it just falls off from there. But our print run numbers were low enough already that attrition, there was no point in attrition. People understood what our books were. So
yeah, but so like tell us the expectation of a 2010 Big Dog Inc. Regular published, diamond previews. What was like a print run from that era?
Well, my expectation, again, knowing nothing, my expectation was that if we put Penny for Your Soul out, we'd probably sell around 5,000 units. That was my hope. And we ended up selling a little over 3. And I was kind of bummed.
Yep.
But then when I talked to my diamond rep, she was like, look, nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows who your company is. Nobody knows what this book is. Nobody knows who your artist is. Like, no one knows anything. And you sold 3,500 units or whatever. And I was like, that's true. And even so that we basically had that many in stock because we had pre-printed the book already.
And I was about 5 to 10% of that production run.
Yeah. And so they all went out, and I was like, oh shit, now we don't have any copies. So we went actually back and we did another 5,000 print run for the second print. We put those into Diamond. We sold like half of those through Diamond. That's the second print right there. We sold half of those through Diamond too. So technically we sold like almost 6,000 copies of #1, just through the retail side of things.
Right. And that was also when Aspen and Zenoscope were at their primes as well.
Yes.
So not only did you have the attrition rate of those numbers, but you were going against two guys that were really peaking.
Don't forget Dynamite. Nikki was nailing it out of the park then too.
I will give the credit to them, because I think that because of what they were doing, retailers were willing to look at us and say, well, we're selling all of this stuff. This guy's got a book that's kind of in that vein. Let's dive into it. And so I absolutely know we coattailed on that. And then every time we put out a book, like Critter was similar numbers that we put out in the summertime. And then Oz came out, it jumped. We did like a little of somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 for #1 on Oz. And then the following year we did Ursa Minor, and I think Ursa Minor was like around 4. So we kind of always were in like this 3 to 5 range on everything across the board. And then,
or as we like to call it, a non-Batman title at DC these days.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But then, when we got to our spike was clearly J. Scott Campbell. I mean, he gave us a spike. But then that was right at the end of us on our own, because right after that is when we started talking to Aspen about switching over to them. And because we kind of started to see because like I said, our numbers are the same, like all the time. I was starting to get frustrated because I'm like, what can I do to break this glass ceiling? How do I get us from 3 to 4, from 4 to 5? And I just kind of felt like if we had somebody like an Aspen that would put their name behind us and say, yes, we believe in what these guys are doing, that might crack that glass ceiling for us. And so I talked to them, and they were like, yeah, I mean, we know what you're doing, and it fits with what we do. There's no crossover as far as genres or anything. And so, after we did Big Dog Inc. for 4 years all by ourselves, including multiple books in the Diamond Top 300, not the 500 that it is now, folks, the Diamond Top 300. We moved over to Aspen to see if that would give us sort of credibility in the eyes of anyone.
And what did you find out?
It didn't. It didn't hurt us.
That's what I also want to discuss for all the young up-and-coming publishers. Sometimes you top out, and you have to be happy with that top out. And you just need to keep plugging away with what you've done, which is consistency.
Sure. Yeah, consistency is part of it. And if we had just, to be perfectly honest, if we had just kept going on our own, we might have been able to break it on our own. Because what happened was when we went to Aspen, and then again, the internet's working, but it's not really working. Right. It's not hot stuff, it's there, but it's not there.
It's growing.
When we went to Aspen, we picked up a whole lot of new people, obviously, but the people that had been following us as Big Dog Inc., and we were no longer in the Diamond catalog anymore as Big Dog Inc., they were like, oh shit, I guess Big Dog's gone. And they just drifted off. And they were like, well, Big Dog's gone, I guess. And so while we were with Aspen for 3 years, at cons, Big Dog Inc. logos on the books. Yeah. Like we never disappeared. We never left. And we continued to produce books through them.
Well, and the way Diamond is, you were actually earlier in the catalog because you were under A for Aspen. So there was no excuse on. I looked in the catalog and I didn't find. Dude, look.
Yeah, but if people, here's the thing: people get into ruts and they're like, "This is how it works, and this is what I understand." And if they understand Big Dog Inc. is under B in the catalog, and they go there. Oh, maybe they don't have any books this month. And they go the next month. Oh, there's no books again. Yeah. Big Dog Inc. is gone in their minds, because no one's telling them otherwise. We tried to, of course, but we didn't. Here's the interesting thing about Aspen. Because Aspen just reprinted our books. Now, we did have a little bit of some new content in the back, just a little bit, like 6-page backup stories or whatever. Obviously, new covers. The interesting thing about Aspen was that our sales on what were essentially reprint books were almost the equivalent of what we were already doing by ourselves. So the fact that, we did garner some notice, clearly, because there were stores buying this stuff that either had never bought us before, and now they're buying because it's Aspen, or they're buying the same thing they just had 4 years ago, and they were fine with it. So that was really interesting that our numbers were as high as they were with reprint material. And incidentally, now I'm being published by Antarctic Press.
Right.
Antarctic Press has now picked up Critter to reprint the series from issue 1. No new material.
Well, and
only
if you
a
know
couple of new
Antarctic
covers.
Press's
Hold on.
history,
Only a couple of new covers, and those print runs were almost 2,000 units for a third printing of the book.
That's interesting.
Well, but see, but what I was about to say is if you know Antarctic Press's history, Critters fits perfectly.
That's what I told Ben Dunn.
Yeah, and the thing is when I saw that happen, I was like, oh, why didn't you think of this earlier? And it was just like, because that's their audience. They have that audience, and then all of a sudden to put your chocolate with their peanut butter, it's just lightning bolt. So good call on that one.
Yeah,
that's what I told Ben. I was on shows like these podcasts, and Ben was a recurring guest, and Ben just kept saying, "Yeah, we're looking for stuff. We're looking for stuff. We're looking for stuff." And I was like, oh, "God damn it,
yeah,
Ben, I got stuff. Let's talk about stuff."
Yeah, I
think I got something for you.
Sure.
Do you like furries, Ben?
I think your pivot point was you understanding crowdfunding. Can you go over crowdfunding a little bit? As you pivoted coming out of Aspen into the crowdfunding world?
Yeah. So when we left Aspen, and it was a fine split. They just were going into Hollywood, and they had to focus on all the Michael Turner stuff, and there wasn't going to be a place to do our stuff there. And I was like, I get it. At that point, I had a choice to make. It was either go back into Diamond and just say, hey, Big Dog Inc.'s back. Let's just put our books in there again. Or try out this thing that had kind of started to become interesting.
What year is this, by the way? Sorry.
This would have been 2017, I think, when we did Penny for Your Soul, coming out of Aspen. And I just said, like, look, let me see what this is. Let me test what's going on here. And so we went back to the basics. We took Penny for Your Soul, and I said, we're going to make a new arc. We're going to run it concurrently, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we're going to see what we can do. I was told immediately that I was stupid and that I shouldn't do it that way, and it's not going to work because attrition and such and such and such and such. And I said, you know what? Screw off. I'm going to do it my way because I'm tired of people telling me how to do things. And if it fails, it fails. But I'll learn from the failure, and I will pick it up, and we'll figure out how to do it. So the first Penny for Your Soul one did about $16,000. I don't know. 250, 300 backers, something like that. The second one did almost identical numbers, backers and money, 16,000. And then we got to issue 3, and suddenly we went from 16 to 20. And then we went from 20 to 25, we went 25 to 30, and it just kept going up. We went inverted attrition. We got higher and higher and higher the farther we went. And I was like, God damn, there's something here. I still knew, I was still clueless. Everything was still sort of seat of my pants. I'm trying to absorb information and analytics and be like, why is this working? How do I translate this to other books? Blah, 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 blah. But I knew that from that success, this was how I was going to do it. There's when you're at the retail market, you, especially at our level, low levels, you are chasing all the money that you put into these books. You're chasing it. Now, crowdfunding, you're still technically chasing it, but you're doing it in a context of sales, immediate sales, because your money's being put in your account like 2 weeks after the campaign. So it's not like Diamond where you're like 30 to 60 days and then they send you a check. And if you're making enough money, you're at least funding the project completely. Right. And then you move on to the next one. Even if you don't have profit, you funded it, you have the product, you move on to the next one. And so that was it. I was like, at retail, we had to print 5,000 units. 3,000 or 4,000 went to Diamond. Then we had to make a whole bunch of variants. All the variants we had to take to cons. All the cons we had to chase that money. We're spending thousands of dollars to go to cons.
Yep.
Thousands of dollars to make variants. So we have to make thousands of dollars to break even. Like, it's a rat race. Particularly when you're an artist and a publisher, or a writer and a publisher. When you're an artist like Marat, it's a lot easier because you can sit down at a table and draw Spider-Man for $100, and you can do that, 10 or 20 times at a con and do all right. Whereas for me, I got to go out there and be like, my comic is $5. You know how many freaking comics I got to sell for $5 to make all this money? And that's where all the convention exclusives came in, because you can get a higher margin, $20-25 or whatever. So when I saw, doing this kind of money and getting paid quickly through Kickstarter, I was like, this is a game changer. This was an immediate game changer. And I put all of my focus into, what is this? How does it work? What are other people doing? In fact, I took Brian Polito to lunch. I messaged him one day because we had known each other just through the con circuit. And I was like, you're doing Kickstarter, and I don't know what the hell this thing is. Can I just take you to lunch and pick your brain? And he was like, let's go. So, we went to lunch and took an hour or two, and I just had a checklist of things like, what the hell is this? How do you do this? What is all this stuff? And he was great. And when I ran out of questions, he looked at me, he was like, keep going. I was like, I don't get anything else. I think I ran out of questions. But he was great. And he was instrumental in us trying to figure out how to get started in this whole thing. And
that's important, that there are people out there that you can go to, especially as a startup, a new business person, to go to and ask questions like that. Those people that put themselves out there, like Brian Polito,
And this goes to what we were talking about with my 10 things I learned from Gary Reed from his funeral. Give your knowledge freely. And that's kind of one of the things that, we talk about on here. The kind of people who take the time to explain to somebody who clearly could be down the line a competitor, but he took the time, and he didn't need the free lunch. He took the time to sit with you that he had met just, peripherally at the convention circuit, and he explained everything to you. He didn't have to do that. He loves doing that. And that's one of the kind of hallmarks that you see here. Is people who give their knowledge freely.
Yeah. One of the strangest things that happened to me is, as I started to do cons in the early days, is like, people would come to the booth and you could feel like you're a movie star somehow, right? To them, because they're on that side of the table, and to them, everybody who's on this side of the table, they must have done something special to get that.
We always called it the thick brown line, but then they turned to white tables, so it was the thick white line.
Yeah, but it's like, here's the secret. I paid for a table. I mean, like, there's no superstar stuff here. But it was interesting because as we grew and we had more and more books and so on, we would have people come, a lot of artists would come, like, want to show me their portfolios and stuff. And I'm like, who the hell am I? Why are you talking to me? Zenoscope's over there, Valiant's over there. Like, what in the world are you doing here? But I would always try and sit with these guys and be like, okay, show me what you got. Maybe there's somebody good here. Like when we found Natalie. I always tried to give back some semblance of like, here's a portfolio review, or here's how I did this so that you can do that and whatever. So I've always thought about that, but it was really weird that it happened so fast, that people were treating me like I had accomplished something when literally I hadn't done anything other than put money into something and bought a booth and presented myself with some banners.
And what I loved about you also was you took chances on shows, for my show in particular. And one of our guests, what?
I said, yeah, God did we were, that was one of my things, was like, we have to be everywhere. Because I lived in California at the time when we started this thing. And then a couple of years later, we were in Chicago when we moved. But even when I was in LA, I was like, I have to be at Baltimore. I have to be at Heroes Con. I have to be at New York. I knew these shows. I'd never been to them, but I knew that everybody had talked about them. I'm like, we have to do all of these things, MegaCon, all that kind of stuff. So Holy
Well, but
crap.
I'll tell you what, and I remember because I was at that 2009 or 2010 Arizona. That was what was the first year, Jesse, of that little Arizona one that they had in the little convention hall?
2010.
Yeah, that's Jimmy J's Mesa.
2010.
Yeah.
So I actually was at my father's visiting Phoenix, and I kind of tagged it up with that convention. And so I went to that show. So I met you there, and I probably met Jesse, other than I hadn't known you really that well then. But that show was a new show. Nobody knew what to expect from that show. A lot of people don't realize it. Yeah. But so much stuff blossomed from that show.
See, that I remember show happened because of what Jesse was talking about. Yeah. We were all in the community at that point. Yep. Zenoscope was right across from me. You know what I mean? Like we were all just there. And so it worked. And then we got a couple of comments in the thing here. Haven for Heroes, we were talking about Critter, and he says it sells like a new book on the shelf. That's so awesome to hear. That's fantastic. And then Fighting the Codename says your books were always high print right from the early days. Let me tell you a secret about that.
Yes.
That happened because I was stupid.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about paperweight or anything at all. Yep. So when we went to my first printer, I was like, here's our files. None of them were formatted right. Here's our files. Send me comics, like whatever. And so when we got the books, they came in and they were very high quality, and they had like cardstock covers on them.
Yeah.
And I picked up the book and I was like, oh my God, they put these like heavy covers on them. Like, do we want this? And then when we started to go into cons, people would come and pick up the book off the table, and you could see it in their eyes immediately. Like, ooh, that's a real book right there.
A happy little accident.
Yeah. And so when I saw that, I was like, well, that's it. Everything we're doing sticks with those covers. And as the person who at that time was still using CGC, your books came back 9/8, like yeah. We were really good with your grading, for sure.
Yeah. So the one thing I want to ask you about, and I've known you long enough to be able to pretty much ask you this without any hesitation. You are a very opinionated person when it comes socially.
No.
Is that a plus? Is that where do you tell me about the pluses? Is there any negatives about it? And you seem so comfortable. That's the thing. You're very comfortable with us. Tell us about that.
Well, for me, it's like if you're not real about what you're talking about, it comes through in an instant. Like this isn't real, and it can be not real in a joking way, and that's fine. But like, there's people that will talk about stuff that clearly don't believe what they're saying. For whatever reason, like they either want to be part of this group that agrees or disagrees or whatever. It's just
echo chambers.
Yeah, it's just the internet. But for me, and you saw it at your shop, Jesse, because people at Jesse's shop would know that I hate stuff, and if they come and ask me, I'm going to help them with whatever they want. You need Deadpool? It's over there. You need Harley Quinn? It's over here. How can I help you? But the instant they ask me what I think about it, they're getting a real answer. So some people were very sort of shocked by it, and other people just rolled with it. They were like, "Yo, that's amazing. That's really funny. This is it's a good interaction." Because in the real world, folks, not everybody agrees on everything. Yeah. And so if you can find a way to just casually be in disagreement, you're going to have a much better life. And that's just the way it is. So, I can't stand Deadpool or Harley. And we were putting up Deadpool and Harley displays all over the damn store. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, I can't look at this anymore. But people would come in and be like, where do you got Deadpool 27? I'm like, let me help you. It's right here. Yeah. Like there was one time we had a guy who came in. We had just seen Last Jedi, right? He had come into the store and I was working on something. And he was like, hey, did you see Last Jedi? I was like, yeah. And that was my answer. Yeah. And he was like, so what do you think about it? I was like, are you sure? Are you sure? And he was like, yeah. And so I went through it and I was like, this is bad. This is bad. And he looked at me, he was like, oh man, now I feel bad for liking it. And I'm like, no, this is not the point. Yeah. You can like what you like, but you asked my opinion. So you got my opinion. And he was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that was it. So
I used to get so much grief in my store. Well, I didn't get grief in my store. People would ask me what I thought of this DC storyline or that DC story. I'm like, they shit the bed on that one, and I don't have anything positive to say about it. I stopped reading it after about 3 or 4 issues of the New 52, and they kind of dissed us all on 52 Weekly, and then I kept getting all these retailers online just chastising me, like, Dennis, you need to support DC if you want a strong store, and I'm like, my sales are up 20%. It's clearly not my opinion.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because, and I've talked to retailers about this a lot because I'm like, man, I can't look at most of this stuff, and I know that you can't look at some of this stuff, but I know you can't say that. I know you can't say, oh no, don't buy that X-Men because it's no good. So you guys have a hell of a job, sort of being constant hype men. To move product through, and I give you guys a lot of credit and all respect.
I was watching a video talking about that today, and this person was talking about how a lot of these let's call them like new comic book influencers that have kind of popped up over social media over the last 3 or 4 years, and he was talking about how they constantly are saying why this book is great, why this book is great, why this book is great, and they're constantly trying to sell you a book, but it's never about like, oh, this book, like, you can't say why this book. It's always got to be positive from these people because they're trying to sell you something, So
and they're trying to curry favor from the publisher for their next variant and their next, collaboration. So I mean,
and I think that a lot of people. I think that a lot of people. I do a show on Friday nights with my good friend Ben Steiniger. It's called the House of Stein Hot 10 Comics, and I think a lot of people really like. Ben. Yeah, I think a lot of people really like that show because Ben will constantly say, "I don't know why this book is selling," or "This is a garbage book." It's honest. It's not constantly saying, "Oh, this book's amazing. You got to go pick it up now." No, sell it now. Don't pick it up now. Sell it now. That type of thing.
I'll take this back, and again, this is all Jesse James' fault. My first or second Phoenix Comic Con, my first ever panel that I was on.
Yeah.
Right. And it was something to the effect of like creating women in comics or something like that. So this panel has J. Scott Campbell, Joe Linsner, Billy Tucci, and me, who's been doing comics for like 1 year. Right.
Yeah, and Justin, don't forget Justin Miller, who's
that's right. And Justin Miller. Yeah. But all of these guys were late to the panel, right? Like 20 minutes late. I am sitting on this table in front of a packed room of people that don't know who I am.
Yep.
And
they just are there to see J. Scott, really.
They're there for Scott. That's 100%. I have 20 minutes to fill of who I am and what I do and why I matter. And that is where the opinion came from. This is where I just said, I'm going to tell you whatever I want to tell you. Because we got into Q&A and stuff, and they were asking me, like, what do you like? Like, what women characters do you like? And this and that. I was like, Wonder Woman, this and that. And they were like, oh, yeah, cool. Do you like this this book or that book or whatever? And I was like, well, I was reading Wonder Woman recently until Gail Simone came on, and you could see the eyes open up. They were like, ooh, he likes Gail Simone. And I was like, and then I dropped the book immediately. And you could see the room just collapse, like, no!
Yeah.
And who was that other writer that took over after Gail? Jody something or other?
Jody Pellicott or so whatever it is.
Yeah,
I can't
and it was like New York Times best-selling, and I'm like, I can't give this thing away. What?
Yeah, it was bad. And so as I'm doing all of that, and I'm giving my opinions, which I shouldn't have been doing probably, then Scott and everybody else comes in, and we have the panel, and it's all fine. And then at the end of the panel, we're all standing there. I've got a picture of all of us together, and I won't say who, but one of them comes over to me and he says, I really liked what you had to say. I can't say those things because I work for these companies, but I really liked what you had to say there. And I was like, I'm off to the races now. I understand what I need to do to be relevant and at least catch attention for a guy that has 3 comics out and has been in the business for years.
It's what we talk about on other shows for Bryan. It's the integrity, the honesty, and I can't remember. It was one of a conservative vlogger who said authenticity is one of the best currencies right now. And I can honestly say, like, when you ask me my opinion online, I'm gonna fucking tell you.
Yeah.
You know, when I come on to a show, I'm not coming on to candy coat something. I'm there to be authentic, and that's my currency.
That's why every time someone tells me, or they make a post, you know, somewhere like that, Tom's going to be on the show, I always share it, and I'm like, I'm going to cause some trouble tonight. Like, here we go. Like, let's see where the rabbit hole takes us, and I'm happy to chase them all.
Unfiltered. Let's ask you about some IP questions.
Oh God! All right,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh well, let's start with this. Andrew Garfield is the best Peter Parker Spider-Man. I'll put that into the universe right now.
I'm a Hammond guy myself, but
That's just because you're old, Dennis.
Yep. Yeah.
Most people don't know who that is.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
it's the TV movie Spider-Man. Jesse, come on.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, your thoughts? I think Bryan can ask this the best way because Bryan deals with this constantly. Well, how would you ask Tom a very important IP question that's been going on in your shows?
Yeah, I mean the line, we always talk about that line that you have to follow, and there's always these people that seem to be not cognizant of the line, or if they are, they just like say fuck it, and they ruin it for everybody. Yeah, they ruin it for everybody. So what do you and you deal with this a lot, you know, and being a up and coming public, you know, a smaller publisher and trying to create these characters, and you have created characters, you know, Critter and all these other characters you talked about. These are your IP. How do you protect your IP as well as not crossing that line for IP infringement in your own publishing?
Well, we don't really do anything. I mean, we've done things like cosplay covers and stuff in the past, but they've been like seriously modified from the original source to be something new. Like it has the tone that you understand what it is, but it's clearly a modification for whatever character is doing the cosplay thing. So, you know, we've always come that way. And again, that goes back to art, right? It's like, why do I want to just like put someone in the Rogue costume? Like, there's no design to that. There's no originality to that. That is boring as hell to me to look at. If I want Rogue, I'm going to buy the X-Men book. Like, why do I need that? So we've always sort of circumvented that, and we just are like, well, we're not doing it that way. We're going to do it, you know, new design way. So other than that, you know, we have a few things that are public domain that we deal with. Like The Legend of Oz, The Wicked West, which is our Western reimagining The Wizard of Oz, which the books, the Baum books, not anything else, but the Baum books are all public domain. So you can pick and choose things out of that to use how you want. The only thing you have to be careful of is anything like the original MGM movie and so on. Like the Ruby Slippers, for example, are MGM copyright.
Oh,
you
wow.
cannot use Ruby Slippers.
That's a
in
perfect
the book,
example.
They were silver slippers.
Well, and my daughter just did a high school play of Wizard of Oz where she played the coward. She played the Scarecrow.
Yeah.
And the whole time it was silver slippers.
Yeah.
Silver.
Yeah. Silver slippers. So for us, I still wanted the Ruby. And what I did was, you know, as I was trying, again, design, right? Design matters. Guys, I'm going to say it again. Design matters. Take your time. Design matters. So I was like, well, how do we get Ruby into this thing without doing Ruby slippers? And she's not going to wear Ruby slippers anyway because it's a Western. So I was like, you know what? That would be badass. Ruby spurs. So she's got a set of Ruby spurs, right? And then I paired that because I was like, well, she's got to have guns. So I was like, let's take it to one more level and we'll give her Ruby bullets as well. And so, you know, that's kind of how we did that kind of thing. So, you know, we've played with a lot of this stuff as far as like creating and sort of protecting it. We haven't really had an issue as far as protecting it. We're not big enough. We're not Brian Pulido. We're not Lady Death, where people are like trying to just draw our stuff and make money off of it. It just doesn't happen. Now, we have a lot of our artists that do prints of our stuff. They have absolute permission to do so. I've told them, like, you've done a cover, let me sell the book first. Give me a few months, and then you can put a print out. And I have no problem with it. I don't take any money. Like, that's just bonus for you.
Right, sure.
If you want to do it, you can do it. If you don't have to do it. So that's really been like, so I don't have to chase people down, and that like I know Bryan kind of wanders around and he's like, who's got that Lady Death print? Nope, here's your cease and desist, get out. But for me, it's not really an issue. But I do see all these guys that are doing like cosplay covers and just nonsense that they should know better. But it's everything is just that slippery slope. Once you're on the slope and you see it working, they're going to find ways to go faster and faster and faster towards whatever monetary goal that they're trying to get. And they're not going to worry about who's getting stepped on. And here's the problem. Until Marvel, DC, Disney, whoever decides they're going to step in, there's literally nothing that can be done.
That's why we have
literally their legal requirement to defend their copyrights and trademarks. And if they choose not to, then that just keeps throwing the doors open wider and wider and wider. I mean, fan art alone, like if you're sitting here drawing Batman and you're selling 100 prints at 100 shows, that's IP theft at the technical legal level. That is IP theft, right? And then if you translate that to 20 artists at every show selling 200 prints at 200 shows, the money is astronomical. But if Marvel or Disney don't come in to say you can't do it, they're just going to keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I like
scale. That's the point, is it's at scale. It's not original art. Like, they're clearly okay with original art because they make sketch covers. Sure. It's clearly a 100%.
I'll tell you, this is not out of the question, because I'll tell the audience, and I wanted to bring this up, but I think this is the perfect time to. It never happens until it happens. And I was at Chiller Theater back in 1993 or 1994 in New Jersey. It was one of the biggest shows on the East Coast for pop culture. Autograph show, that kind of thing. But they had a huge dealer room. And just one day, one show, and it was the buzz of the show. This little company called Toho Studios had found out that there was a lot of bootleg Godzilla stuff. And they came around on the first day, and they just took log of, okay, this booth. And then the next morning, before the show opened, these, like either Secret Service or one of those... federal trade organizations came in with the New Jersey State Police and a whole bunch of boxes, and they just started boxing up people's booths and go, this is all IP infringement. Evidence and now. Guess what? And it just, they boxed it all up and it was gone. And it's like, well, no, but wait, that's this. And nope, we think that's bootleg. We'll take it. And like literally overnight, the entire convention circuit for toys got word of that. And then guess what? The next big Atlantic City toy show, no bootleg Godzilla. The next big show, and there was no big East Coast comic book show. And for years, people would just talk about, don't forget Chiller Theater. Watch that bootleg Godzilla stuff because they're out there.
Well, and then that eventually just grew to everything. And there was a period of time where it was all shut down. Yeah.
Yeah, and then 2008 at Motor City Comic Con, this is the height of the bootleg VHS market. The Motion Picture Association of America decided to make an example out of all the bootleg dealers at that show.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing, but one notch higher. So they came through on the first day of the show, and they marked out all of the booths. And then the opening of the show the next day, while the show was going on, they showed up with the Michigan State Police, the Novi Police, and MPAA, and they put a cop at every booth and said, stay right here, don't move, you're not allowed to sell any of this. And then they went through and systematically cuffed and perp walked every bootleg video dealer, loaded up their entire inventory, legitimate stuff and illegitimate stuff, threw it in the back of a giant Ryder truck, mugshot and arrested every single one of those bootleg video dealers. And then guess what? Convention circuit all across the country. This is like 2008, 2009.
Yep.
All the bootleggers just stopped coming.
Yeah, I think we're in a different world now. I do believe, this is my personal opinion, I believe it's the convention's job to ask, hey, I see you got that Batman print. Do you have permission from DC to do that? Well, yes. Okay, let me see that letter. But
There
because
was
they
a time-
don't,
Yeah. There was a time not long ago where the contracts for these things changed. And in the contracts, they started to use terminology like you cannot sell unlicensed whatever.
right?
But I never saw anything come of it as far as like what you're talking about. Like, hey, you don't own Batman. Where's your licensing agreement?
I know that happened, and you might remember this. That happened at Wizard World Chicago.
Oh, it happened at a lot
in,
of
like,
places. It was
2012.
everywhere.
But do you remember the whole incident with Mark Texteria selling prints of Ghost Rider that he didn't do the artwork of? He was selling someone else's. I forget the whole details, and I think Bleeding Cool covered it back in the day.
Well, that's happened a number of times too. There's been a lot of booths that are like, "Who are you? Are you the artist?" No, I'm selling this for other people. And Wizard has, well, they don't exist anymore, but Fan Expo now. Fan Expo was like, "Yeah, you can't do that. You're here to sell your own stuff, and this is not you. So get out of here."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of these things where Marvel and DC, Disney / whatever, could at any time decide that's it, folks.
Right.
And they won't warn you. And they won't warn you.
I expected it to all have already happened. Like Disney's owned Marvel for way too long for it to not have happened.
How do you choose cons that you go to? Because I know you've scaled down.
Yeah.
But how do you make that final choice on doing a convention?
I now get invited to most of the places that I go. Now a lot of the bigger shows like a C2E2 or whatever, I'm not going to get an invite there. But I've done enough. I've done them all. So I kind of have an understanding of what each one requires from an attendee standpoint to what do I need to sell to, what's the cost? But I've shifted a lot of what I do from the bigger shows, San Diego, C2E2, Emerald City, New York, all that, to like smaller, just smaller shows.
Regional.
Yeah, regional shows, yeah. And it's because a lot of those are far more comic-centric. Maybe not focused is the word, but comic-centric. They have a lot of creators there. They're doing a lot of comic stuff there. Maybe there's some Power Rangers, or a wrestler or something, but I can compete against that. I can't compete against Tom Holland and all this kind of stuff. So when I see Comic Cons that are like, hey, it's this Comic Con or whatever, and it's like, yeah, here's our list of guests, and it's just nothing but Doctor Who and Walking Dead and The Office and whatever. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere near that show. If they want to comp me, I'll go to your show. Like, bring me there as a guest, I'll do your show. But I'm not spending thousands of dollars to compete against all of that. There's no way in hell. So it's just been kind of curated over the years because I've done so many in so many different places. I know where comic fans are, and that's where I kind of like. There's comic fans here, I'm going here. Comic fans here, I'm going here. And then, like I said, a lot of these regional shows now, they're just like, dude, come. We want you to come. Here's a table. Like, come to our thing. And I'm like, awesome. That's great. Like, let's do this. And then I try and tell them, I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to do a panel? Do you want me to do like portfolio review? Like, what can I do to like boost, the event for you? A lot of times we'll bring some of our artists with us. So like we're doing Motor City this year. CB Zane's going to come and sit in. And then Stephanie Menard, one of our writers, is going to come. So I try and do things like how do we level this up for you guys in whatever way I can. Because again, even though I'm known, I'm still not known. I'm very regionally known.
Right.
I'm very specific locations. If I go to Phoenix, people know me because I've been there so much. I go to Chicago, people know me because I've been there so much. I go to Texas, nobody knows who I'm in Texas, but somehow I got a comp booth down there. They were, they were like, "Yeah, come, we'll give you a booth, we'll pay for your hotel. We're going to bring Nei out." I'm like,
deal.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's let's do that. So that's super exciting that we keep getting these random invitations now.
Do you have any restrictions on your AP deal, or is it just Critter? Everything else you can do separately?
The deal for AP is they're just reprinting the old series. That's it. And they get to run it for as long as they want to run it. I told him, like, look, we've got like 30 issues or something already in the can, so you can run it for a few years before you even reach to where we are, and we're still doing more now, so we'll get ahead of you again. And then they decided to go ahead and do it bi-monthly, which basically means it'll be at AP forever, because doing every other month, and then we're still doing issues, it'll be eternal at AP. And I'm like, well, if that's the way you want to do it, I have no problem with that. And it's been great so far. Ben and Brian Denham have been spectacular. So, they're very easy, and they do a lot of stuff with other people. They've got, oh my God, they got Larry Higgins with Niobe. They have Mary Machine Gun. They have Ron Zabala's books. They have Tim Lim's books over there. So they're actively looking for content like all the time. And if it's just short content, they have anthologies that they can put short content into, like Exciting Comics or Jungle Comics or whatever. So even if you just have short stories and you want to pitch it to them to get it into an anthology, you're probably not going to make any money. Like, they're not selling like crap tons of units of these things. But if you want to get your name attached to a publisher and your work in the hands of fans through the retail market, they're always looking for at least anthology stuff. But if you want to pitch like a series, the requirement is simply you got to have at least an arc done. Even if it's an ongoing series, give us 1 through 4, 1 through 5.
Right. And it'd probably help if they have a cat tail and ears.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt.
A question that Brian always says on his shows, and I kind of know your answer to this, but Brian always asks about variance and how it affects the industry.
Retailer variance.
Yeah.
Yeah, not ratio variance, but retailer exclusive variance.
Retailer exclusive variance. What is your opinion on it? I have a feeling that it's a huge benefit for it. It doesn't affect the industry. What is your opinion on that?
It's a huge benefit. It's a huge benefit because you've got a retailer now that has the impetus to sell your book, right? And it is their job now to sell Ursa Minor, Critter, Oz to their customer base.
That's a great point. I've never thought about it that way.
No, that's it, and that's actually my. It's always been my point.
Great point.
When Tom does a variant with a retailer, that retailer now becomes one of his best
partners.
Pitchmen.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
In fact, we just had somebody out of the blue hit me up the other day. He was like, "I want to do a variant for you." I was like, let's go. Here's an artist. Here's a colorist. Here's the concept. Done. It was done in like 3 days. We had it ready for him.
Do you think a publisher, I think where there's this disconnect when it gets to exclusives, a lot of publishers don't investigate. I maybe investigate isn't the best word to do, but they're not really making sure that seller actually matches what the overall ideas of selling your product. Do you feel there should be a stronger moment process. Of pause when you pick your stores?
I don't pick the stores; they pick me.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah. I don't actively go find people to do it. They just come to me and they're like, "Let's do a thing." I think there's a difference though between us and sort of the general sense of it, because for us, guys will come in and be like, we're going to do like 100 copies. I'm like, yeah, cool. That's fine. Where if you're doing it like at Dynamite or Marvel or DC, you got to do like 3,000 units. And, all of that, they do that because that bumps up their print numbers, which get reported into the larger ICV3. And, look, we did 100,000 units. Yeah, but 50,000 were variants, but it still counts as 100,000 units, So for us, it's purely a partnership of like, okay, here's a retailer that understands who we are, understands what we do, thinks that he can sell the book. And then we work with them to make sure that they get something that works for them. Okay. Right. Like there's so many times that I've seen retailers get variant covers from these companies. I'm like, did you ask for that?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't really look that cool, man. And in their situations, they're basically given like, here's 5 of them, pick the one you want, but they only have those 5. For us, it's all direct to what the customer wants. He was like, I want vampires, I want 2 girls. I want them in Gothic style clothes, not like rave clothes, like old school. I want this. I want this. I'm like, done. Easy.
Right.
Send it to the artist, and we do it.
I think my question, now that I understand the wording, is the vetting process. Let's get into the vetting process. That's
Okay.
more what I was asking. We're in a world where you kind of technically don't have to have a comic book store to do an exclusive with a company.
Sure.
Do you think there's a fine line there that needs to be a standard thing of, well, you just sell it on YouTube, or is it okay that they don't have a retail store?
Like we talked about earlier, the world is the internet now. The idea that brick and mortar is the only way to do anything, that's ancient thinking. There are plenty of people that do online retailing, and I'm not even talking about like Whatnot and stuff. I'm just talking about they just are, they're in this
Shopify.
Retail world, variant world. Like, hey, we've done it with Zenescope, we've done it with Scout, whoever, and but we just have an eBay store, or whatever it is. And I'm like, you know what? From a publisher standpoint, all that is more exposure to your product. And if the book is good, like, again, if we're focusing on making a cool cover and not just like, well, here's 8 things, pick the one you want, that levels up the retailer as well. Hey, he's got something that no one else has. He's got a cool looking thing that the publisher helped create for them, which is what we do in our case. And okay, it's available on Whatnot, it's available on eBay, whatever. Again, once it's out of my hands, like we've printed them, they are yours. That guy now works for me. He's selling them and keeping the money, but he's working for me because he's promoting my book, my brand, my artists.
Well, and that's where I was going to say is as Jesse and I always talk about, with 2 very highly visible brands for our company, you've always zealously guarded your brand and put your brand in places where you thought would grow your brand.
Sure.
And that's kind of curating, as from the publisher, you're curating your brand ambassadors.
Sure.
And if that's an eBayer or a YouTuber or something else, that's going to be where you spread that, shotgun blast to.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, here's the thing. I mean, we have almost no social media presence outside of the basics of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. So if someone's on YouTube and they want to go screaming about Big Dog Ink on YouTube, yes, please. Like, do it all day long and sell those books. And then when they're sold out, come back and we'll do it again. So again, it's Tyler Carpenter, man. I don't know if you guys know who Tyler Carpenter is. He's a great creator, and he always talks about the funnel of sales funnel. And at the top is the big wide circle of awareness. And that is the part that you need to have the absolute widest you possibly can, because all the funnel does is trickle down to finally getting sales at the bottom, and it shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. So the bigger your awareness circle at the top, the more people at least know who you are, what is being talked about for you. So if someone wants to go on Whatnot with my books, great. Someone wants to go on YouTube with my books, great. Someone wants to put it on eBay on one of the books, great. You want to go Facebook Live with my books, great. Take my brand wherever you go and tell everybody that it's awesome, because that's basically the wizard method of old, right? One focused point where it's like, hey, we're going to tell you what's cool and you're going to believe us.
Yes.
Because we're wizard.
Yeah.
And so these guys basically become our street team. Hey, we're selling Ursa Minor, we're selling Oz. We talked to Tom, and we need all of this and all this. So I mean, I don't know. I've never run into a problem with retail guys. Like, I've worked with Brett with Blue Rainbow, Anastasia's Collectibles. Like, I've worked with a ton of retailers over the years, and we've never had a problem with any of them.
Sure. Right. And then I just have one final question for you. I want you to kind of take the publisher writer thing out. You're also a comic book collector. You're a hardcore comic book collector. You've been doing this for a long time. Where do you think the market is in the selling part of just the general market in comic book sales?
Be more specific.
Do you think it's healthy?
So do you see the rise of prices being an issue? Do you see the overage and clearance sales, or is this just an ebb and flow point? Where do you think the market is today? Is it stronger today or what?
It's a huge ebb and flow right now. I mean, last year I went to Motor City Comic Con and I was going through a guy's dollar boxes, and I looked at this stuff. I was like, this seems really new. Like this is a little weird. And I grabbed one of the books because it had magic on it or something. And I was like, all right, let me just go. And then that night I was on a podcast and a guy comes on and he says, so I went to the new comic book store today. This is what I bought. And he showed me that issue. And I was like, that's new today? And he was like, yeah. I was like, wow. That is in dollar boxes right now. Like literally right now, that's in dollar boxes. And it's because these guys are doing these gigantic variant runs, buying into these variants, and then all of the books that are left over are they're just dumping them. It's immediate dollar discounts. I was blown away, and that's problematic.
Yes.
The price point. I mean, we're definitely on the higher edge of price point for sure, particularly at the retail level. It's hard to sell $5 books that there's tens upon tens of thousands of these things in existence. With us, we might have a $5 book where we're making like 500 of them. Our print runs are so low that.
Well, that's a good question though. So they always, the big two and some of the mid guys always say, oh, well, the paper cost is going up. The printing cost is going up. You've been in this now for 14 years. What kind of percent have you seen that raise? And what do you see the corresponding of?
It's gone up.
Yeah, but nowhere near we have to double our price per issue.
And again, for us, we're printing a few thousand units. These guys are printing 50,000 units.
And that price comes way down when they get there.
Way down, yeah. So yes, all of that is true. Paper printing, all of that is up,
I mean, let's just let the audience know. It's complete bullshit when they say we have to charge $6.99 for this anniversary issue of Spider-Man or this variant issue of Batman that we're selling to retailers.
There's dependencies to that. It's how many are they making? Number one, of course, it's what did we have to pay? Like if there's Jim Lee covers or whatever, that's going to skyrocket your budget, that kind of stuff. So there are dependencies to it. But yeah, we are definitely at a point where I can't even think of a book now. Catwoman 58, probably could still be like a $3.99 book pretty easily if they wanted it to be. Here's the other side of this, though. Just because you have a lower price does not mean people are going to buy an extra book. So if everything's $5 now, but it all reverted back to $4, and you bought 5 books and you saved $5, that doesn't mean you're buying another book with that $5. That $5 could go to McDonald's or coffee or whatever. You know what I mean? People still buy what they want to buy.
But I'll tell you what though, leaving that extra, if they buy 5 books and that little business model, it does correlate to them having an extra, what I called sample purchase in there.
Yeah,
and that's where
yes. And I'm not saying it can't happen.
That's where I sold your book. If I saw that they, and they would, have that extra book, and I'd be like, oh, hey, you got Oz over here. Check this out.
Yeah, 100%. But again, the retailer comes back to the retailer doing their job.
Right, but also the retailer, if they don't have to spend so much, and this is what put the tinfoil hat on me. Mm-hmm. When the big two started seeing you guys coming up around that 2010, 2012, 2014 era, I think they were I think they knew what I knew, which was if my diamond preview bill was X, and then I went back over before pushing that send button, I could sample a few more guys like you, a few more guys like Aspen, 100%. New Books, Dynamite, etc. And they were like, you know what? How do we keep Dennis and Jesse and other retailers from having that extra money to spend on these little guys?
100% true.
Yeah. 100% and I mean, that's where I think they understood, okay, if the retailer doesn't have that extra money, they're not going to spend it on anybody but us. And that's where the kind of, I think, starving out of the smaller guys also started to go.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. 100%. 100%.
I want to ask a very important question for. There's a lot of people I know out there that have thoughts of maybe becoming a publisher. And if you could give advice, what are some of the best advice that you think you could give somebody who's wanting to take the steps of becoming a comic book publisher like you have?
I mean, I only became a publisher, whatever that means, just by writing a book and putting it out. Like, don't get hung up on the terminology too much. You're a creator, right? And we live in a world right now where publishers, I don't want to say you don't need them, because look at me. I went back to AP and we're using them. But for the last 8 years, I hadn't been in comic book stores. I have just been doing crowdfunding, eBay, Comic-Cons. That was my distribution. And so don't get hung up on the idea of being a publisher, going to a publisher. Like, focus on what you're creating first. Like, make sure that whatever that is really good, because right now in this world, you have the opportunity to skip all of it and go directly to the customer. Mm-hmm. Again, whether it's your own website or eBay or crowdfunding, which there is a wildly active group of people on Kickstarter specifically that is there for what they don't see in stores. Now, there is a lot of Kickstarter stuff that filters back into stores over time. But, be first. Even Polito takes his stuff that he did in Kickstarter and sends it back into the retail market. But that's years later because he's so far ahead on his stuff. So I think right now, and this goes back to Jesse's point as well, his question is, we're in a Wild West period of comics right now, of comics creating. And crowdfunding has completely opened the doors to anybody who wants to do something in this vein, whether they want to do it for real, like a business, or whether they just want to do it for fun, vanity project. I just want to say I did it. Go to Kickstarter. Now, this doesn't mean that you can come out of the blue, be zero-sum game, go on crowdfunding and Kickstarter and make 20 grand. Can it happen? Yes. But it takes time. It takes design. It takes story. It takes character. It takes a lot of research and probably even requires a little bit of name recognition, which is where the variants come in, right? Oh, I got an eBass cover. His fans come looking like, oh, what is this? But you can start low and grow, right? Like, that's what we did with Penny for Your Soul. We started at 16,000. We ended at, I don't know, issue 7 was like 35,000 or something. You can grow on that. And I'm seeing people now that have started at 0 and they're growing, and it's slowly, but they're growing. They're not doing 20 grand yet, but they're doing like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. They're growing because they're consistent. They're putting their books out. People clearly enjoy them, and they're having that little, bump of success every time they do stuff. So be a creator. No one cares about the publishers. Like, no one cares. IDW, Boom, Scout, like no one cares what the publisher is. It's who the publisher is publishing. Mm-hmm. So it's the guys that are on Power Rangers. It's the guys that are on the Planet of the Apes books. It's the guys that are on Transformers, whatever. Be the creator and really focus on creating something cool, genuinely cool. And you'll become a publisher just automatically. Once you print a book and send it out to your fans and your backers, guess what? You've published a book. That's it. Simple as that. You're done.
Nice and easy, man. That's great, great information.
Creator first. Create. Yeah.
A lot of great Cornbread information's been dropped tonight by Tom. You guys, make sure you guys go give him a follow on Facebook. You can find him at Big Dog Inc. You can go to bigdoginc.com for his store and more information, and you can follow him on Twitter and Instagram also. Where's the best place for them to go, Tom, for
we really live, well, I should say I really live on Facebook. That's where everything kind of starts, and then it kind of spreads out to all of our other various social medias. We do have a Patreon, so if you're interested in seeing kind of how we make the soup, We'll show you everything. We show you logo designs, character designs. We show you the line art, the colors, the cover, like everything just kind of filters through Patreon, and they get to see it all first. There's also exclusive offers for those guys. Every 6 months, they get a free variant cover just because they're there. As a thank you, twice a year. So if you guys like the creation process and you want to get involved in that, go to patreon.com/BigDogInc. But yeah, it's you can find me on Facebook. You're welcome to friend me up. There's also the page that they're showing you right there, the Big Dog Inc. page. You can hit up there too. And then we're on Kickstarter basically 4 to 8 times a year. So you can go to Kickstarter and follow profiles there as well. So that way you get a notification. Hey, Tom did something else, and then you can click on it and see if you want to do it. We have Critter going right now. It's Critter number 23. And it's been going crazy. It's been absolutely crazy. It's only been 3 days. We're almost at $15,000. So it's been great. We want you to all be part of everything that we do. I understand that Critter is not for everybody. If you don't like superheroes, we do westerns, horror, science fiction, fantasy, kaiju. We do everything.
Is this what we're talking about right here? There we go.
That's it.
So for everybody that wants to check out Critter number 23, I know a lot of people out there that are listening and watching right now know about Critter and Big Dog Inc. Because we love to talk about your books, as secondary market sellers. They're always
all of our books on our crowdfunders are limited to 100 copies. 100 copies, guys.
Yeah, you're very cognizant of the collector and keeping things limited, which is very important to you.
But we're also cognizant of the buyer.
Yeah.
Because we sell all these books at $25 a piece. That includes your shipping as well. There's no gouging over here. We're not trying to nickel and dime you out of everything that's in your wallet. Like we've kind of worked this from print runs and dollars to kind of find this nice sweet spot of a very affordable book with great art inside and out. We always have great interior art as well. I always from the beginning I was like, look, covers are easy, but if your inside interiors don't match up to what people are seeing from Image and Marvel and DC and whatever, you are way behind the 8 ball. And so we've always had great interior artists to go along with our covers.
Amen. Hell yeah. Jesse, looks like you went. You got something there. What is this?
Nothing. Just kind of showing that off there. I know Tom's a big Jaws fan.
I literally just got the new soundtrack. Like it's literally right here. They just put out a brand new 2-disc thing that has all of John Williams' tracks. So I'm freaking out on that.
Well, Tom, thank you, man, for coming on, and appreciate everything you do over at Big Dog.
Are you coming to Monroe? Are you coming to Monroe this year?
Yeah.
All right, I'll see you at Monroe Comic-Con.
We'll be there. They gave us a corner again, so I'm bringing CB Zane as well. So we'll have an extra bonus artist. So anyone wants to go to Monroe Comic-Con, it's down a little below Detroit. It's a cool little show. It's just Friday and Saturday, and
it's Wonder World Comics' hometown event.
There we go. Hell yeah. So, all right, Tom, thank you so much, man. And like I say, with all the guests that we bring on here, there's always a spot for you. And let us know if next time you got anything that you want to talk about. We'll have you on for sure, man.
Happy to cause trouble anytime.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you. All right. Good stuff, man. That was really cool. So
did you mention Cornbread earlier, Brian?
I did mention Cornbread. Do you want to get into some Cornbread before we call it a night?
Yeah. So I got a piece of cornbread for everybody in the chat. I think we got 64 likes, and how many thumbs up do we have?
We got
48. That's pretty.
64 live right now and only 47 likes. You guys hit that like button. It really helps us in the analytics and gets the program out there to more people.
So one of the best things about being Jesse and I and the giant volumes of comic books, we start seeing names and addresses pop up in our orders. And one of the great things I love to do is we have our famous file. People in that are Nicolas Cage, Guillermo del Toro, just all of these famous people. Usher buy comic books from us. And we don't often get to, but we kind of get a hint at where these are going and for what reason. So if you want to bring up that link, because you can't see the buyer.
Which
but I'll
link?
show you
the one?
book.
Which link? Which
the
one?
last one. The last one I shared.
Okay, hold on here.
So today, right when we were preparing for this episode, I sold a comic book to a very famous, very prolific, 20 years in the business, animator in Burbank, California. I'm not going to tell you who it is and what it is, but this person buying this book strikes me as one of those kind of little finger in the wind moments. And I've heard so many rumblings in the past about them, Turok getting a video game. These titles are up for grabs. And this one, I believe, just came back to Dynamite just recently. So we'll have to talk to Nicky Barucci and see if he's heard anything about this. But a TV show animator who does a lot of different kinds of animation just purchased this from me today, which is kind of telling. Maybe he's just a fan. Might be nothing. But that's the kind of spec that kind of gets me thinking when I start seeing events like this.
Yeah. Well, Magnus Robot Fighter, a longtime comic and property, and a lot of comic books out there for him. So we'll be definitely listening and keeping our ears to the tracks, so to say.
So I wanted to show you guys something since Dennis brought up those cards. So I bought the original 1967 sticker card set, which is kind of hard to see it, but this is the complete set.
Clear,
all great shape, amazing.
Nice.
Bought that at a garage sale this past weekend. So you never know what's out there, folks. Complete set, 1967, first marble sticker set ever to come out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's super
Fun
cool.
stuff.
Yeah. So for everybody out there that is new to the channel over the last couple of months, thank you for hanging out with us. We do the show every Tuesday night, and every once in a while we have specials that we put out. Next Tuesday, come hang out with us. We've got more great guests. And if you don't know about the other shows we do on the channel, there's all kinds of different shows for different types of people. Our Wednesday show is very collector oriented. We also do a comic book marketplace or market report. Our Saturday show is very wild and crazy. It's where we have our world famous comic book drama alert segment, which is going to be very spicy this week. So come hang out for that. And of course, Friday night we do the House of Stein Hot 10 show. Make sure you guys are following both these retailers that are next to me. Of course, Jesse James and Dennis Barger. You can find Jesse James links below. Go check him out on eBay Live, where he does sales every day. What are you doing now?
Day. Yeah,
every day.
Every day.
Yeah,
15 shows a week.
There we go. And of course, Dennis Barger, you guys can follow him on IG, and also go to the Mall of Monroe to check out both his shops. And if you're and that's in the Michigan area. And then if you're also in the Phoenix area, come out to see Jesse James Comics out here in Phoenix. That being said, you guys got anything else for anything? Good to go.
No,
all right.
I'm off here right to slinging some books. Always got to be slinging and having some fun. Congratulations to Rob Liefeld on everything that's happened with him this week. It's one of those things I kind of tell people I get mad at him because he continues to help us make more money at the comic book store level. So thank you very much, Rob.
Yeah, amen. Couldn't have said it any better.
Absolutely.
Much love, you guys. We'll see you next time. We're out. Peace.
Okay.